Okay, are we on? Yes. Welcome to this public meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Palo Alto Unified School District. The board returned from closed session where we took no reportable action. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda order. Is there a motion?
I move we approve the agenda as presented.
A second.
Student board members, preferential vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Board members, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The agenda is adopted. The first item on our agenda is the celebration of my departure, actually. So there's some enthusiastic participants in that. Shall we get? I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Brienza for this.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you're turning it over to me, and I get to start it. Mr. Dauber, today is your last meeting with us. There are many people here to celebrate you and thank you for many of your accomplishments. But one note I want to make for anyone who's tuned in over Zoom or here in person, if you would like to make a public comment related to Mr. Dauber, after all of our speakers that we're expecting here already, please fill out a card the way you would any other thing. He's item number 2A. Just fill it out for 2A. And make sure you get those in, and we'll call on you after we've got our other speakers done. But since I am here and I am leading this, I get to start. And it feels, Mr. Dauber, it feels weird, but I'm going to stick with Mr. Dauber. So it wasn't long after I joined the board that we found ourselves in an unfortunate situation where you were acting president and I was acting vice president. And we got to work together pretty quickly. We were on agenda setting, and really you were sort of my buddy in a lot of our goals that we were very aligned in a lot of things. And one of the main things that you really taught me was about how this role works and what our position is, and how to get things done, because you're pretty good at that. So I really appreciate over the past 8 years your tireless work on behalf of all of our students, and all you have accomplished in really supporting their well-being, primarily over anything else, but lots of stuff, but primarily that. And I wish you all the happiness in your next chapter. Because I'm first, I'm going to hand this to you first, but of course you're not going to look at it now. There are some things in here from the board, from the staff, from a bunch of folks. And so hopefully you'll have a chance to read through all those letters, and your gavel's in there. And for now, we've got a lot of people that want to say things, so I'm going to get started on our list. So thank you for all of your service.
Thank you so much.
You will be missed up here. And there's a chocolate bar in there too.
I hoped there would be.
So I do not know, we have resolutions from the office of State Senator Josh Becker and from the office of Assemblyman Mark Berman, but I'm not sure if the representatives are here right now. So I don't see them in the room. So I think that, Derek, if you can just keep an eye out for them to come in over Zoom, and we'll move on down the list and come back to them if they get here, because they have some pretty nice resolutions to read about you. So we are going to start then with PAEA President Terry Baldwin. If you come on up to the dais, and right after her will be CSEA President Meb Steiner.
Hi, thank you. So, Mr. Dauber, you served as trustee for 8 years, finding your purpose and passion. So we just wanted to wish you the best of luck for your next steps and what's ahead. So, thanks.
Meb Steiner.
Good evening. On behalf of CSEA, I just want to say thank you for your service to our school community. You've served 8 years? I can't believe it's already been 8 years. And before that, however, you were also very deeply involved in a lot of issues. And so I just want to express our gratitude that you were willing to give your time and commitment to our schools and our community as a whole. On a personal note, I will always remember very fondly working with your son when he was studying at Gunn. And I think those connections are so important in our school district. the ties that bind. So thank you so much for your service. And we too wish you all the best on whatever your next chapter is.
Thank you. Next, we're going on to some former board members who are here over Zoom, and we'll start with Heidi Emberling with Terry Godfrey to follow.
Hello. It's been so long since I've been in this room. Wow, wow. Yet it looks the same. Ken, thank you for your dedicated service to the Palo Alto community over the past 8 years. Ken and I met on the campaign trail in 2012 and served together on the school board from 2014 to 2016. It was a rough time for the school district as we grappled to respond to a cluster of teen suicides. During our tenure, we launched wellness centers at both high schools, doubled the number of counselors, worked to address homework loads across our district, brought in the CDC to help our community identify risk factors and protective factors to prevent these tragedies whenever possible. We also participated actively in the Minority Achievement and Talent Development Task Force, looking at disaggregated data for student assessments and exploring the role of implicit bias in our classrooms and its effect on the achievement of Black, Indigenous, and other students of color. I always appreciate Ken's ability to center equity in this work, to see the big picture, to focus on the key issues facing our school district. At the time, we were also the only 2 school board members struggling to balance full-time jobs and school board service, and the only 2 from across town in Barron Park, so we bonded over that as well. Ken has the keen ability to focus on an issue until we see results. I saw this in his advocacy for children with disabilities, and I modeled my own advocacy for full-day kindergarten on this laser-like approach to making change. Ken, thank you for your service and your tremendous dedication to this community. I wish you all the best on your next journey.
Thank you so much, Heidi.
Ms. Godfrey.
Sorry, you think I would remember that I'm supposed to be in line and be ready to talk. I totally forgot. So sorry. So all those good things that Heidi said, we also did together, which was awesome. We campaigned together, which was less awesome, because that can be like tiring and grueling, and we must have done like 15 debates and forums and such. But with good humor, I always thought of us as sort of happy warriors, along with Gina and Catherine when we did that back in 2014. And then we got to serve together. And I very much appreciated, as Jennifer referenced earlier, when you covered for me when I was out on medical leave. And then in 2018, or in the year that I was president and you were vice president, we had some good times getting agendas together and getting work done. And we had some rough times too, where we had a lot of national attention that really was hard to keep focus. And I really appreciated your ability to keep calm and keep focused on the students and keep focused on the matter at hand and try and leave the noise behind, because the noise can be distracting, but the students are the important part. So thank you for that. Thank you for your years of service. I appreciate you, and I'm happy that you're going to have a chance to go do something different with your Tuesday nights.
Thank you.
Ms. Baton-Caswell.
We can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
Wait, we can't hear you.
Pause. Wait a second, we can't hear you. She unmuted.
He appears to be unmuted, yes.
We can hear you, if that helps.
Here we go.
Jeff can hear.
Okay, great.
People on Zoom
Awesome.
can hear. Oh, here we go.
We hear you.
Okay.
We just
Hi,
need-
Ken. How you doing?
Hey, Melissa.
Hey, well, I wanted to come in. As you know, I couldn't come in person, but I wanted to come in and I wanted to thank you for all the work that you've done on the board. And I specifically wanted to thank you for 2 things that really stood out for me. One thing is that your laser focus continually for the whole time you've been on the board and before you were on the board for student mental health. I think that your laser focus made some things happen that otherwise would not have happened. And I could do a long list. Heidi touched on some of them. I think for our student board members here, maybe one of the biggest things is that school starts later. And I know that was a California state decision, but I know Ken started working on that way early. So thank you for that. And I also want to thank you for making sure that our board policies stayed aligned with current law. It's hard to keep up with that. Current law changes a lot. National law and state law sometimes don't align. And I appreciate that you had a laser focus on that. And I guess I want to end with maybe the thing that's most memorable to me about you personally was walking with you in the Mayfet parade, your first year on the board. I don't know if you even remember this. And you had all sorts of friends running up to say hi to you. You remember that?
Yeah, I do.
Usually you throw candy as a school board member, but I felt like they were throwing candy to you. So anyway, I hope you have a wonderful time on your next adventure, whatever it is. And I see your family here, so I know that you have some people to spend it with. And it's nice to see you.
Thanks, Melissa. It's great to see you.
Okay, I'm going to switch things up a little bit and let Jeff go first because there's only so long you can sit in front of a Zoom with a little one. So why don't we start with your family with Jeff?
Well, I'll keep it short since we may have some mic noise, but just wanted to say I'm very proud of you, Dad, and I'm extraordinarily pleased to hear that so many other people got to enjoy your wisdom and sort of knack for distilling things down to the essential and shedding the noise. I think I also reflected that. So very proud of you.
Great.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Awesome.
Hey, Audrey. That's the cute one.
Wait a minute.
Sorry to discriminate, but
Let's move on to, can Annie go next?
The cutest one.
I'm cute too. I don't know. I also just want to say that I'm really proud of you, and I've heard like bits and pieces over the years about what you're doing, and it's so exciting to see what a big impact you've had. And thank you for sharing it with us.
thanks, Annie.
All right. I don't know if anyone's camera is off that wants to speak before I go to Michelle, but I'm going to go to Michelle. And if you are logged in and a member of Ken's family and dying to talk, turn on your camera or let us know somehow. But otherwise, Michelle, why don't we go to you?
Thank you, Jennifer. So Ken, I'm so proud of you. You really have done a remarkable job in so many ways and really taken this obligation so seriously, and I think really benefited the whole community. As I reviewed sort of what your important achievements have been, I think many of them have been mentioned, but I'll just say what I think, which is that suicide prevention, which was obviously a very big issue when you came to the board. And I think the biggest and most important intervention in that was late start. I think we learned about that later in the cluster, but once you met with the doctors and scientists and learned about the importance of sleep, you were, as other people have said, laser focused on that issue. And I think we've really seen dividends from that issue. And I appreciate that you fought for that. And I hope the current board doesn't roll it back. Your focus on relieving student stress and on student mental health. I think that for people who are new to this district, if they went back 10 years or 12 years or 15 years, it's almost unrecognizable in terms of the focus and the money and the resources and the effort that's put into student mental health and well-being now compared to then. And I really, of course, that's the whole board, many boards, that's Melissa and Terry and Heidi and all of the other people here too. But I think you really were the catalyst for that. And I think that's undeniable. And I don't think it would have happened without your leadership. And then on the subject of leadership, I think that, possibly your main contribution has been in the area of governance and oversight and compliance. And I think that you've done that with remarkable charm and grace and bringing people along with you as a good leader. and making them feel part of that process and part of those improvements, as opposed to, you know, fighting it out. And I think that's the mark of a great leader. And I think you have been a great leader. I've certainly learned a lot from watching you. So I'm really happy that you had the opportunity to do this.
Thank you.
Nice. Okay, we are going to pivot now to current board members, and then we will go to the public, whoever has filled out a card. So if you haven't filled out a card, fill it out yet now. And Ms. Lettermark, why don't we start with you?
Yay, I get to go first. Am I allowed to call him Ken? It seems weird. Ken.
It's weird to say Mr. Dauber, right?
Ken. It really has been my privilege to serve on this board with you for the past 2 years. But I really want to speak to you as a parent tonight and give you a long overdue thank you that I think is going to mirror a lot of what you've heard from other people. It wasn't until just a few years ago that I started doing much beyond trying to keep 4 babies and toddlers alive and a small business afloat. Honestly, for most of your 8 years on this board, I was barely paying attention at all to school district matters beyond what was happening in my own children's classrooms. But all that while that I wasn't paying attention, I know that you were. And you were working, usually thanklessly, on behalf of my kids. And all of us who entrust our children to PAUSD, we really all owe you a huge debt of gratitude for what you have done to ensure that this district prioritizes and uplifts them as whole human beings, that we define our success as an educational community by more than test scores and GPAs. And I think your wife just said it pretty eloquently. The connection between mental health and academics is something we all pretty much take for granted these days. It's this idea that psychological safety is integral to academic success is sort of non-controversial in our district right now. And that really has not been the case in our district and in our town for very long. And similarly, the belief that even if our students succeed academically, we're not doing our job if they aren't thriving as humans. There's really been a sea change over the past decade, and I'm not planting a victory flag by any means. Our students tell us loud and clear all the time that we still have a lot more work to do. But my point, I guess, is that institutionally and systemically, we now agree with them as a school district that we have more to do. And you were a huge part of that, as everybody has recognized tonight. So first as a community member, standing up and demanding that change, and then working on this board for 8 years. So, and I agree, it's your ability to really identify and hold the district accountable for focused, concrete steps that can move us forward. So thank you for how much you've done for our students, for our children, for my children. I am very grateful to you.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Dara.
Thank you. Ken, before you were on the board, when you first started getting involved in mental health issues in Palo Alto and PAUSD, I had just graduated from Gunn. And I say that because at that time, those were issues that were incredibly important to me and to my peers. But I didn't yet have the tools to address them. So you started that fight a long time ago. You continued that fight until over the years I went to college, I went to law school, I became a lawyer, I came back to Palo Alto. And you had set a very, very strong foundation for the district to continue on that path. And then when I came in and said, hey, mental health is an issue I've always been passionate about in this district, something we need to address, you had the tools ready for me to come and use as well to try and move it forward. So that is a sort of just a preface to where where our paths crossed early on. Really interesting is the dynamic between me and Ken in terms of age is relevant because I am about the same age as your son. And in fact, I was in the same graduating class at Gunn as your daughter-in-law, Victoria. So we went to school together. So
they're both quite young, though. I just want to point that out.
So I came on the board. I came on the board with that dynamic, which is you had this outsized impact in my mind already on the district, on the board. We campaigned together, and already I was, you were very formative in my perception of what it is to be a board member. You've been formative in how I govern. But I remember in the first couple of years, before we got in the trenches of COVID, every now and then we'd have a board meeting. I'd go home, and then I'd see Ken Dauber on my phone, and heart start beating like I was in court. I would be like, oh God. I'd pick up the phone, and in like the nicest way possible, Ken would essentially say, you made a terrible decision. And here's why. And that was very helpful, because it really helped me learn about why Ken made the decisions he did and what Ken's approach to governance was. And that really helped shape my own approach to governance. In my field, trial lawyers, we like to say that how do you get the truth? Through cross-examination. And I've probably met only one or two lawyers who are better at cross-examination than Ken. And Ken has taught me a lot about looking at issues as we take them at the board level, asking the right questions, because Ken doesn't talk if he doesn't need to. But when he does, you listen, because it is always important, and it always makes an impact, and it always changes minds. So I've learned so much from Ken, not just about being a board member, but about being a lawyer, even though Ken's not a lawyer, about being an analytical thinker, and about balancing empathy and compassion with the analytical and critical thinking skills necessary to make decisions up here. I dread the future when Ken feels the need to come back to the board and stand from the podium. But I am deeply grateful that he set us on a path where that's not likely. Hopefully, if we continue doing everything right and doing it in the way that Ken has set us on, that probably won't be necessary. So thank you, Ken.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'll call you beforehand this time. So.
Mr. Collins.
Sure. Thank you. None of us sitting up here have ever been served on a school board that didn't have Ken Dauber on it. So in some ways, it can be hard to assess the impact that he's had. But reflecting back over the time that I'm familiar with, in my view, Ken has been the most impactful school board member that we've had in Palo Alto in the last 20 years. I'll mention just two areas that I think he's been a real game changer. First, as many people have said, he's been central to changing the conversation in Palo Alto around student mental health and well-being. That's impacted specific areas like homework policy and start times, bell schedules, counseling programs, as well as our overall approach and funding of student mental well-being. As Michelle and other people said, if you weren't around or engaged with these issues 15 years ago, it's almost hard to describe how much the mindset has changed. In those days, for many of us, and I include my family, student stress and mental health were viewed as a sacrifice that we had to accept for academic achievement. And we tried to not to talk too much about it. Today, we view student mental health and well-being as a foundation of student success. That shift was in large part due to Ken and Michelle and their willingness to speak up on topics that not everybody wanted to hear. A second area that other people have also mentioned has been changing how our board operates, how we do our job up here. Again, if you weren't spending Tuesday nights at board meetings, as some of the people here were, it's hard to capture how different things are today than they were 10 years ago. He led the effort to clarify the board's role, clearly separating out our policy and priority setting and oversight roles from the execution role of the superintendent and his team. He focused us on board action, votes, not talk, and specific impact on students, since that, at the end of the day, is what we're all here for. He played a central role in making it so our district can consistently set priorities and execute the plans to achieve them, which I think is the hallmark of any successful organization. Does that mean my time's up? I could go on, and maybe at some future point I'll get the chance to, but I just want to say I personally have learned a ton from Ken about education, about board governance, about dealing with adversity. And for now, I just want to thank him for his service and his remarkable contribution to our board and this community and all of our children. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay. You two want to do yours during your report, or do you want to go now? During your report? Okay. Dr. Austin?
Yes, thank you. I'd ask for just a moment. You have a letter from me that tells you more than I'm going to say right now, but I will say in preparation for interviewing here, and Ms. Godfrey and Ms. Batenkaz will know this also, I prepared by watching every meeting I could see. And then I got the job here, and so I just want to start by saying I was terrified of you. Yeah, you were scary. And then I want to go fast forward 5 years later. There was almost nothing I enjoyed more than our 8 o'clock in the morning Monday meetings, because they were so full of not only the work, and everyone's talked about the work, but what people haven't really touched on is your sense of humor and joy of life. And there wasn't a meeting that went by that we didn't have multiple big laughs. And I think not everybody knows that piece. You know, they see the work, they see the accomplishments, and they may miss the person. And I really, really appreciate and enjoyed getting to know the person. And, you know, I'm going to miss you.
Thank you so much. I feel the same way.
I believe that your daughter Celia is on here somewhere. I don't see her, and I don't think you see her. Tell me if I'm missing her.
I don't see her, no.
But Celia, I mean, no pressure, but if you want to say something, maybe you'll pop up on screen if you start talking. Or not. You're here to observe, that's good. Okay, if you do, just raise your hand or, you know, let us know. Let your mom know, and she'll let us know. We will know if you want to speak. Okay, we've got some community members here that have signed up to speak. You're doing okay still?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay,
It's a lot. Yeah.
Good, it's a lot. It is a lot, but you know. Christina Schmidt, followed by Mary Vincent, and then Sarah Woodham. This is your life.
Ken, thank you for serving 8 years and providing the best of the best for our students and community. I look around here and I realize that I can't say half the things that have already been said about you, and your colleagues, your peers, people you serve with are a testament to your great leadership. And I have to say that I thank you for that. But, you know, 2014 was a good year to become a school board trustee. However, you were here before that, and I remember that. And you inspired me to become a parent advocate, for better or worse. And I remember watching you before you were elected, week after week, coming to these meetings and challenging the leadership to make student first the priority. And again, as everyone has said, calling out mental health, academic stress, the achievement gap, and something near and dear to my heart were the needs of students with disabilities. And you stayed there and you spoke and you welcomed all of us that were in this community. And then you went on to do some great policy things. I mean, I attribute you with really staying on watch of the UCP policy and bringing that bullying policy and that harassment policies to our district. And those still are in place. And they ensure that our students and our families today can have due process in this school district. And you called out and you challenged the leadership for that by asking for transparency and accountability. And you asked for legal audits, which is a whole nother conversation, but those were big topics back then. And you welcomed a new and diverse group of parents. I was one of them. And before that, I never was really sure, is anybody going to listen? Were they hearing us? And you welcomed us in. You gave us a seat at the table to really talk and be part of the conversation. So when I think about you, I think that you're someone who stayed the course through weathered very difficult and challenging times, harsh criticisms, and yet you maintain your professionalism, always, constantly. And I remember, we can do better, Palo Alto. And that was your rallying call. And I believed it then, and I believe it today. We've come a long way, and I just want to thank you. My family thanks you on behalf of us. Be well. Thanks.
Oh, thank you, Christina.
Mary Vincent, Sarah Woodham, Carrie Wagner.
first, the walker's temporary. I had back surgery. It's just 2 more weeks with the walker. Then I can walk with impunity. I also wrote my comments out because I haven't spoken to the board in so long, and I timed them because I didn't know how long I would have. So I first saw Ken, it was either in 2010 or 2011, is this guy who kept coming to every school board meeting, asking the district to adopt Project Safety Net's proposals. I think it was P8 of the plan. Was it P8?
It was P8, yes.
Oh my God, it was P8. I pulled that out. Okay. That called for changes in our school system to protect and support our children's mental health. Ken joined the homework committee to help define guidelines for homework, which resulted in the current board policy on homework. I supported and campaigned for him in 2012, the first time he ran for the school board, and again in 2014 when he was elected to the school board. Ken has been an exemplary model of what it means to be a school board trustee. He's been entrusted with our children's welfare and has always had the interests of our students as top of mind. He is unflappable, which certainly helps in a community that is as engaged as ours is in Palo Alto and many other communities like ours. He's been a steady presence. There have been and will always be times when there are lots of competing opinions on issues and when emotions run high about those issues. My hope is that we will always be fortunate enough to have people like Ken on the board to sort through lots of data, understand the intent behind the opinions, and remain unflappable as the board moves forward in their role as the trustees of our students. That's it. Thank you very much, Ken.
Thank you, Mary.
Nice. Next, we have Sarah Woodham, Carrie Wagner, and then Audrey Gold.
Hi, Sarah Woodham. So what everybody said, in particular, Heidi, I really appreciated you going through like all those items. But I guess what I'll say is, I guess I first got to know Ken as the PTAC board liaison. So I would just come to board meetings, make notes, report back, and then Ken, who I'd never met, would be there at every single meeting, piggybacking on Mary's comment about, and he would stand here and essentially say, my name is Ken Dauber, I'm here to ask the district to adopt, and you would start off with whatever P8 was, you started off with a title. But essentially after about 6 or, I don't know, some number of board meetings, it just got abbreviated. My name is Ken Dauber, I want us to adopt P8. So it just got shorthanded after that. And so, fast forward, you're on, at that point I knew, okay, this is somebody who has the attributes that I really want in a board member. It's like, those were rough times during that time. And, you have a dogged commitment to service, which I really appreciate. And, there were other issues. There was a business of changing graduation requirements. And I think we connected maybe on that one. And that was a 2-year journey, like, people left, like leadership left and got, however you want to put it, in that process. But we got there, and I really, truly appreciated your work in making, helping us to understand the scope of inequity in this district and what that meant to whole demographics of kids who are not seen or heard as they should have been. And, a lot of folks have talked about wellness, and, of course, this is another area very difficult and to talk about, and it's highly emotional. And one of the other attributes I really appreciate is that you were very calm, very rational, very data-driven. Truly, I appreciate that. The data, the analysis, and sort of trying to cut to a solution that we can, a pragmatic solution that we could all we could get behind. So thank you. And as you go forth in your board retirement, whatever that means, I hope we run into each other. All right? Take care.
Thank you, Sarah.
Carrie Wagner, and then Audrey Gold.
Hi, Ken. thank you. Thank you for more than 8 years of service. I really appreciate it. I first got to know you when we were on the homework club together a long time ago, and it felt like that was 2 or 3 years long. I'm not really sure, but it started some conversations. And I also got to work with you a lot when I was active at Gunn during the clusters. That was very, very hard, and I appreciate your solid approach always. But I think what I most appreciate is that no matter what you're focused on, you're always centering the kids. The students are always the most important. And I just appreciate everything you've done for our district and for our families. And thank you.
Thank you, Carrie.
And Audrey Gold, are you on Zoom? If we can unmute Audrey, I think she's our last speaker.
Yes, I just wanted to add my sincere thanks to all those above. You've just been a wonderful board member, and I just appreciate how much you've done for the students in our community. So thank you.
Thank you, Audrey.
Okay. Mr. Dauber, I think we've made it to the end.
Oh. Well, it's very overwhelming and gratifying to hear all of this. Had I known you felt this way, I would have stayed, actually. This is I want to thank, I have a lot of people to thank. As you can see, many of them are here. It's been a real privilege to serve the students of the district these 8 years and to serve on their behalf as a trustee. I have always tried to keep them first and keep their interests first. And like I said, I appreciate the opportunity to serve, and I appreciate our student board members serving as representatives for them. I appreciate my fellow board members who all have demonstrated a deep commitment and concern for the work that the district does on behalf of our students. I particularly appreciate the past board members coming and offering your thoughts. It's really gratifying to see you. I've really learned a lot from everybody who served on the board and admire their commitment and their work. Staff and teachers, thank you, Meb and Terry, for your comments. Obviously, the people who teach in our district and support the teaching of students in our district are the heart and soul of the work that we do here, and none of what the board does would matter if we didn't have such excellent staff in our schools. And so I've admired and appreciated the work that they do over the years. The senior staff that I've had the opportunity to observe most closely, I have tremendous admiration for your professionalism and hard work. I think this is the strongest senior district staff that I've seen in the period that I've been involved with the district. And I can say that it makes a huge difference to have such able professionals executing this work. It's extremely important for the success of the district to have your leadership. So thank you for that. I appreciate all of those members of the community who have worked alongside whom I've worked all of these years, from the days of We Can Do Better Palo Alto and the campaigns that we've worked on together. This is, whatever we've accomplished is an accomplishment of all of us, and I think we should feel proud of the work that we've done together, and thank you for all of that. It's tremendously gratifying to me to have been part of such a deeply committed group of people. My family, most of you whom you can see here, thank you for all of your support and willingness to listen over the years. Michelle is both the brains and heart of this outfit, and so if it looked to you like I was steadfast in pursuit of goals, it's often because I would go home and say, Michelle, I got half a loaf. And she'd say, well, go get the other half. So I've had a tremendous support, as any of you who know any of my kids or Michelle will appreciate. So thanks to all of that. over 8 years, there's, I've taken a lot of votes. I've been involved in a lot of votes. I regret some of those votes. I'm not going to talk about most of them because they were mostly cast by my colleagues, but I do want to acknowledge one vote that I'm very happy to have lost, and that was, some of you might remember that I was the sole no vote on the appointment of Dr. Austin to be superintendent. I'm sure that Dr. Austin remembers that. And I was wrong in the evaluation that led to my decision to vote against Dr. Austin, and I'm deeply grateful to my colleagues for having, on that occasion, not listened to me and voted me down, because Dr. Austin is an enormous asset to the district. I've learned tremendously from working with him. The impact of a senior leader like Dr. Austin on the district is profound. I think it's hard for people who don't work on a day-to-day basis to really appreciate that. But Dr. Austin, it's been a real pleasure to work with you, and I'm so happy to have had the opportunity to do that. And I hope that your leadership of the district continues for a long time to come, because I think students and the community as a whole benefit from that every day. So thank you. I want to this is the last time I'm going to get to talk without being timed, so just settle in. I won't go on too long, but I do want to say a few things, because I think there have been many areas of growth over the last 8 years, and I think it's, I by no means take credit for them. This has been a journey that many of us have been on, but I want to look back because I do think it's important to do that. As several of you have noted, my involvement in the district began during a period of real tragedy in the community with the loss of our students. And then when I first joined the board, that we had another cluster of student suicides. And it really broke the heart of the community. It was a profoundly sad time and a time of profound urgency. And I think many of us were called to try to find systemic solutions to the issues that we saw affecting our students, and to try to move beyond kind of individual explanations to try to find things that we could all do together. And that realization and all of the work that so many people did, both in the district and outside the district, Project Safety Net and many other programs in the city and the community, I think have had a real positive effect for our students. I think we have, as some have noted, really embraced the idea that student well-being and student learning are things that work together, that we don't have to trade them off against each other. In fact, we should never trade them off against each other, that well-rested, confident students are students who are also best positioned to learn. And I think that's just a fundamental fact that if we keep that in view, will help guide a lot of the decisions to make. They certainly guided our decisions in the past, and I think they'll guide them in the future. I think we have made real progress on board and district management. I'm very happy to see a district that can set goals and then execute against them and assess our progress. That kind of mundane work of goal setting and execution and then doing it again is really fundamental to being able to set priorities and then achieve them on behalf of our students. And I think that extends throughout the organization. The people around this table are really critical to making that happen. So thank you for that work. I think we've created an expectation and practice of compliance in the district that has protected students around in areas of Title IX and bullying and disability. And we're a model district in this area, which I think has been a real sea change. Finally, the achievement gap. I think we've made real progress in the achievement gap. It's not as much as I had hoped or expected. and it's one of the most urgent issues still facing the district. But I also think that we're in a position now to make sustained progress, and I think we've seen some signs of that. Our success in moving results on reading, our concentration on absenteeism, the focus on the DNF report, these all give me some real confidence that if we continue to apply that focus, then we'll continue to make progress. So I think we can take pride in all of that progress, and I have a lot of confidence in the board leading the district that will continue to make that progress. And finally, since this is my last time, I'm going to say one more thing, which has been said before. One of the first things that I did when I worked on the board, some of you might remember, if any of you were here then, was to try to end the practice of zero-period academic classes at Gunn, where students were showing up at 7:30 in the morning to take classes. And that was a big fight in the community and in the district at the time. But when the reason that was one of the first things I worked on is because I knew from reading the work of the American Academy of Pediatrics that sleep is the biggest lever that we have for student well-being. And if we can move start times later, then that is a direct gift of sleep to our students, and that's protective against suicide. It supports other aspects of well-being, physical and mental health. It supports achievement. It's enormously important. I think the move to later start times in our high schools has been a great benefit to students. I say that because I think there's always going to be pressures to give up the benefits that we achieve from them in favor of other things that may be more concrete. And I really urge the board and the community to maintain those positive changes, because I think those are tremendously important for our students. So if there's anything that will cause me to show back up at the at the podium, it will be it'll be continuing to push on sleep, because I think that's one of the key issues that it's important for us to focus on in support of students. So thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity to serve. Thank you for all of the gratifying comments. And let's continue with our meeting. Okay, the next item on our agenda is student board member reports. Ms. Sia? Or Mr. Pan, however you'd like to proceed, it's fine.
Yeah, just because I usually go first, I'm going to start. Hi, everyone. I'm Daniel, and I'm here to talk about everything happening at Gunn. But first, I would just like to say that it was a pleasure getting to know you, Mr. Dauber. I was not here during the time when mental health was, as many have said, seen as a sacrifice for academic well-being. I came here 5 years ago, and even though my first year of high school was very stressful, there were resources for us to learn about mental health, to seek help, and to take care of ourselves. And as a student in this district, I couldn't imagine Gunn without that piece of resource. So really, thank you so much for your work on that subject. And ever since my first meeting here, I felt your welcome and warmth. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so now I'll start talking about the events that happen at Gunn. A few weeks ago, we had our Halloween event at the Senior Quad, where teachers and students dressed up for our Japanese teacher, Mr. Hall's costume contest. There were single-person costumes and group costumes, and one of our highlights was that the entire admin team at Gunn dressed up as doctors and nurses and threw COVID test kits at the audience to win the contest. The day after Halloween, we had our Dias de los Muertos events, where students gathered at our Swinging Bird Theater to get free treats and learned about Mexican culture. We also had Unity Day that week after to share awareness about bullying and forming safe communities. All student council members and students were encouraged to wear orange to stand with the cause. We also had our student equity training last week, where students gathered in the library to learn about racial equity from speakers and teachers. A lot of the students found it as a very eye-opening experience because they got to hear about how race impacts everyone differently through everyone's experiences. All right, so events that are coming up. We have the Turkey Feast or the Harvest Feast this Thursday, where our students will be able to get a free meal for Thanksgiving. We'll have turkey, stuffing, vegetables, pie, and also other treats. Parents are invited to volunteer and help out to hand the food. Also, Gun has had very amazing results in sports. Our Gun boys water polo team just won CCS last weekend and are #1 in all of California. Our girls water polo team placed second this weekend as well, and our cross-country team also went to compete at the CCS finals. So this month was a very huge success for Gun sports overall. We had our first fall theater play called Translations. The show was so popular that the tickets were sold out by the time they started playing it. Everyone really enjoyed our theater team's performance, and we thank you to the theater staff for providing such a wonderful show. Our Gun staff from admin, including Principal Stratton, will be traveling to South Carolina this week for a boot camp called Coaching Collaborative Teams at Work, called Amplifying Your Impact. Additionally, Gun hosted its last official site council meeting last week, and we kind of discussed about the consequences of cheating at Gun. And even though on the surface it might seem like a very sensitive subject, students and staff alike brainstormed together on how to approach this problem, including its causes, on how our students value grades, and how mental health plays in all of this. And personally, I felt like it was a very productive and inclusive conversation, and we didn't shy away from saying some truthful thoughts that we thought. Next month, we will have our last site council meeting called the Data Night, where Gun will basically display all of our statistics, including about CASP testing and more. So yeah, that's it for me.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Hello, it's great to be back. I'm Johanna. As we are going into the second quarter and getting more fall-like weather, notably we've been having earlier sunsets and more rain, we've had a lot of changes and big events happening on campus. To start off with sports, as football, band, dance, and cheer are wrapping up with their senior nights, tennis and water polo have advanced to CCS. And with the turn of the seasons, winter sports tryouts are starting last week and this week. In terms of Pally Theater, Radium Girls had their opening night on Friday, November 4th, and closing night on Sunday. If you didn't get a chance to see it, you seriously missed out, but don't worry, I'll give you the rundown. The play cast and crew put on an amazing show, even avoiding opening night curse mishaps. Radium Girls was just an incredibly emotional, relevant, and poignant piece that showcased a hidden part of youth history, and I think was especially relevant for our own day and age. Even though the show has already closed, Pally Theater is gearing up for their Mamma Mia musical with audition workshops during Prime to talk about singing, monologue, and dance audition techniques. As for clubs and student activities, YCS held their service fair in the Centennial Plaza last Wednesday, and Pally's Communique Club heard from Miss California in the MAC. The cultural clubs met with Philip and Mia Rose, who are on ASB, to discuss cultural events and review the diversity survey put out by ASB. For speech and debate, Pally had a smashing success at our CFL 1 tournament, which was last weekend, where many students got wildcards or automatic advancements to the state qualifier tournament in the spring. At the Karen Kiefer Novice Invitational a few weeks ago, we had a ton of students trying out new things, which I think is my favorite part about speech and debate, where students are willing to take those risks and really grow as speakers. Pally Robotics went to their Beach Blitz, which is an off-season robotics competition in SoCal from November 5th to 6th, and Science Olympiad is having their first invitational tournament this Saturday. Publications have been bringing their best, with CMAG releasing their issue a few weeks ago, the Campanile coming out yesterday, and Verde being in production this week. In other news, we had our school-hosted SAT in late October and the AMC 10 and 12 this week. Seniors got the chance to hear back from Speaker TA, who came in the very beginning of the school year at our senior assembly a couple weeks ago. And students also got the chance to hear from Ben Stern, a Holocaust survivor, and learn about his documentary Near Normal Man on Friday, October 26th. Our ninth graders and team also got back from their week-long Yosemite trip this Monday. Ending with ASB news, ASB officers have started with club visits and checking in with our 100+ clubs, as well as working to write handwritten appreciation cards for our amazing Pally staff. We got to celebrate Fall Spirit with our Spookside Lands concert in the Centennial Plaza, alongside senior pumpkin painting event, and class officers have been hosting spike ball tournaments for freshmen and sophomores. We had the Q2 Town Hall on Mental Health, which I planned last Thursday, and I have to say, as the organizer, it was quite a success. We got to hear from numerous students across all grades about issues such as the advisory curriculum, wellness center access, and academic pressure, and I'll be working with my team in ASB to translate this feedback into action plans over the next couple of weeks. This week, ASB is hosting a Thankfulness Week with events such as friendship bracelet making, teacher card appreciation, as well as having our turkey feast and extended lunch from PTSA. Lastly, I want to thank Mr. Dauber for all of his contributions to the PAUSD District Board during his term, especially for the work that I didn't see when I was an elementary and middle schooler. Well, I was not repped as a student on the board, and I did not go to board meetings as an 8-year-old. I know that your contributions really made a real impact in my education and my well-being. I think we as students often are not very observant, to be honest, or take the time to appreciate the work that you guys really do for us. And I want to say that, getting to grow up here my whole life from an 8-year-old in your term all the way now as a senior, it's really beautiful to get to see that shift in culture. And while I obviously want to continue to make these improvements and changes in the future, I want to recognize that so much has been done and this work is really meaningful. So from me and Pally, we truly appreciate you and we wish you all the best, Mr. Dauber.
Thank you so much. Next item on our agenda is the Superintendent of Schools report, Dr. Austin.
Just a couple quick things. First of all, we had the opportunity, thanks to Stanford's invitation, to take about 1,200 of our students, grades 5 through 8, to a Stanford basketball game. And I tell you, it was one of those moments when I looked around the inside of the arena and was like almost overcome with like what an awesome event it was for our kids. So many of the kids had never been to an athletic event, let alone on the Stanford campus. It's one of the things Stanford is trying to do is to make the campus more accessible, because it truly is an intimidating place to go. It's different than other campuses. When you walk on Stanford, you know you're at Stanford. And to invite our kids on and to hear the basketball team there tell me afterwards how it impacted their game. The energy in that building was amazing. Stanford took the extra step of getting every kid, red pom-poms, and they worked the crowd. They had events for our kids. They brought them onto the court. And to everyone who helped put that together, too, I mean, just thank you. From our bus drivers who made loop drives to get them there, to our food services working with us, to our chaperones, to everyone who was a part of that. You created a memory for kids that's going to last a long, long time, and for one big kid too. And the second part is I just got back from a superintendent's conference. It's a group of 100 superintendents from across the nation, and a couple things jumped out at me that I wanted to share. Number one, we're all dealing with the same problems. It doesn't matter where you're at. Some more in the eye of the storm than others, but we all have the same issues that we're working on. We were there on Election Day. I tell you, some of my colleagues were not in great positions on Wednesday that had been in good positions on Tuesday. And good reminder that stability matters and continuity matters, and how lucky we are here to have really good stability and good people who lined up to put their name in to be that next leader. We're lucky that people rose their hand. The last piece of the conference is I was really struck by how many people came up to me, anywhere from Mercer Island to Illinois, Wisconsin, Connecticut, Texas, as far around as you could see. And they not only knew who Palo Alto was, they had stories, specific stories, about how as either superintendents or their school boards benchmark against us. And when things come up, they look to us to see how we're going to react, and they may or may not always follow, but they look. And there's only a handful of districts in the whole country where that's true, and that is true here. And I think that's a reminder for us that if people are watching, we need to keep our standard high. But great events, and I want to show those two. That's it.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is open forum. Open forum is an opportunity for members of the public to address the board on items that are not agendized for discussion this evening, and to speak at open forum or on any of the other agendized items. You can use a web form that is linked from the agenda, and if you need help with that, let us know. And what we'll do is, as a practice for all of these items, please register your interest before the first speaker has finished. That helps us to understand how many people we have and how long to give each of them to speak. We also have a practice of alternating between speakers who are here in person and on Zoom, beginning with those in person. And so I will start with Stephen Davis, who's here in person on Open Forum, and after that will be Star Teach Out on Zoom. Mr. Davis. Is it on? It doesn't sound like it.
Testing.
Yes.
Thank you. I didn't know all your service, and it was pretty impressive listening to that. There have been some puzzling moves by members of the board over the past several months. First, to restrict Zoom participation in board meetings, and then the move to reduce public comments, which we'll be discussing later. This is not your meeting held in public, it is the public's meeting. The goal shouldn't be to reduce public input for an early end to the meetings, but to increase public engagement and involvement. I volunteered for the Palo Verde PTA last year to make sure we had a PTA. There were just enough people. At the elections last spring, only one member stuck with it, and we barely had enough people to stay a PTA. This is not a unique problem. The Palo Alto CAC doesn't have representatives at many schools. The PTA and other volunteers get burned out because it is often the same cadre who does everything. We need more people here believing in their school district, even if they don't have kids in the school, that they own it, not that it is some sort of detached consumer service for which they have no obligation. Here are some things that you might consider doing. Instead of simply filing a report for the ad hoc committees, have the members come here and attend and speak. I bet what they have to say will give you more interesting insights than what is in the minutes. Judge yourselves more by getting more people involved, attending and speaking, not less. Find new and more ways to make these meetings accessible and the voices of the public heard, not just those who are privileged and able to attend at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on our list is Star Teach Out. Is Ms. Teach Out on Zoom? No? Okay. Then let's move on to Celeste Crystal McGurl on Zoom, and if Ms. Teach Out appears, then we'll take her at the end. No? Sorry? Maybe so. Next is Nancy Shepard on Zoom.
Thank you, Ken. And it seems like just yesterday, 2014. So you're done and enjoy your life after Tuesday nights. I remember that campaign well. Hi, I'm Nancy Shepard. I'm a former mayor of City of Palo Alto and former PTA Council president and founder of the district-wide fundraising policy. And today I'm here as Chair Emeritus for the Palo Alto Community Child Care. I'm on their board. I am here to speak on behalf of PAC regarding the initial elements of the Ad Hoc Child Care Committee essential components for after-school child care providers. There are two key elements that are of value to PAC. The first one is the minimum facilities requirement. We'd like to make sure that the board knows and the committee knows that the state and city subsidy program requires PAC to hold a California Department of Education license. This means that our facility requirements need to include a kitchen, specific outdoor space, and other features that we can accommodate so we can accommodate as many kids as possible. Can the committee include these requirements in the components identified? And can the district ensure that the two portables now used by PAC program be dedicated to PAC so that we can maintain our minimum facility standards for licensing? If one space is removed, we will have limited space for full tuition families, and the California Department of Education will reduce our student capacity to less than half. The double portables amplify the investment in licensed care. If facilities are changed for the PAC programs, we will lose our ability to be licensed by the CDE and thus not qualify to administer the district or the city's subsidy program. These programs serve about 10% of our attendance, which is about 45 kids in the after-school care program. The other item is under accommodations for current providers. We would like to have the accommodation for a provider to be a multi-year lease or commitment. We have an established organization with generational roots in the community. We would like to have a multi-year lease, not year by year, for stability and long-term planning. Part of our tuition goes towards capital improvements to our on-campus facilities, and short-term agreements would impact these decisions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think Ms. Teachout is now on Zoom. So Ms. Teachout, when you're ready, you can go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I was on the other link. I was on the wrong one. Well, good evening, and thank you, Ken, for your deep commitment to our district, the lives you've touched, for all the commenters tonight, and for the look backward at our progress. I want to quickly summarize the correction and apology I sent you regarding my October 25 open forum comments for anyone who tuned in that night. During open forum, I asked the board to discuss internally whether election guidelines might be beneficial for reducing perceived bias and election negativity that was occurring in our community. This included a possible recommendation that the board members not endorse candidates until the filing deadline has passed. Of course, this would have to be optional buy-in. I asked you to consider questions with ethical components, and in the interest of brevity and anonymity, I kept number 3 brief. I was told by 2 very trustworthy and long-involved parents that a candidate received questions early for a forum, and I asked if a board member knew about that. It was incidentally a candidate I voted for. Believing it to be true, I included it as an example of the negative election atmosphere. It was partially true, questions were shared, but my sources or their sources made an assumption with whom they were shared with. And as I clarified in writing, PTAC did not condone this, but rather swiftly changed the questions to provide for a fair forum. So I apologize that my brevity led some to believe PTAC might have allowed that. They did not. I've never known PTAC to operate with anything less than fair and professional protocols. And I do apologize for passing on what was not completely true information. However, I am glad the rumor can be put to rest. There is one other rumor I want to address. Some people jumped to the conclusion my comments were orchestrated by a candidate or a supporter of another candidate. This is also false. We had 4 candidates, And the purpose was not to single out one, but rather to send a message, especially to our candidates, our school leadership, and our community, that our behaviors, especially during elections, do matter. Thank you.
Thank you. So we don't have Celeste Crystal McGurl, is that right? We do. Okay. Ms. McGurl?
Hi. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. My name's Celeste. I'm a mother of a 4th grader at Nixon Elementary who also attends Kids Choice. We are a big fan of Kids Choice and the excellent quality of daycare that we've received at Kids Choice on the Nixon campus. And that brings me to the topic of quality. And as a working mother, I know how important high quality daycare is. And I do believe that all children deserve high quality care, including low income kids. And I believe that licensing is the way to ensure this. And so I want to highlight for any decisions that are made with respect to daycare going forward, licensing means that the providers, whoever they might be, will need to follow high standards. And there are baseline standards, including teacher to student ratios, high qualification standards, as well as safety. And all of this we have experienced at Kids Choice directly. And that is an institution that has gained our trust and our family's trust. I was a little bit surprised when it comes to the concern about the licensing not being a big issue for any newcomers into our community. And my immediate response is, when you don't prioritize this, you're telling us as parents that doesn't matter, that just, pull something together quickly, put it hastily in place. And then what, ends up being is that our children become kind of secondary to the entire conversation. So I want to ask the board, many of you on the board have children. Would you want to send your children to an unlicensed provider? And would you feel comfortable going to work every day knowing that that was the case? So I think that's one major point that I want to highlight, and the reason why we are very concerned as a community about this. Now, the second point I'd like to make is just in terms of disruption of our children's sense of safety with the providers that they've gained a relationship with over multi-years. And this is something that is extremely important, to have that multi-year contract and the continuity of care, and do not disrupt our children from a known established provider. It's something that can be very psychologically very scary to children when that is disrupted and changed. So I think overall, this is the point that I want to make is we love Kids Choice. We love our current providers that have provided a high standard of care, and any transition away from that is something that is disruptive to families, disruptive to our children, and something that that I find objectionable. Finally, when it comes to an outside entity that's coming into our community, the question is,
Ms. McGurl, Ms. McGurl, your time has expired. If you can finish your sentence. Yep. Okay. Thank you. And anybody, whether they're commenting or not, can send email to board@pausd.org, and we'll have your comments. Next on the list is Mary Vincent. I don't see Mary Vincent here. I think she spoke earlier. So that concludes open forum, and we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the approval of the consent calendar. Items on the consent calendar are approved all at once without discussion, unless any member of the board or any member of the public wants to comment on the item, in which case we'll pull it and place it at the beginning of the action items. I don't have any comments from members of the public on the consent calendar.
I move we approve the consent calendar as presented.
I'll second.
Student board members, preferential vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Board members, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The consent calendar is adopted. Next item on our agenda is our action items, beginning with item 5A, the Fletcher Middle School theme and choice program proposal. Dr. Austin?
Yes, we're bringing this back for the second time. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Lopez in 1 second. Also, Ms. Howell is here if questions arise. But specifically, we're just going to touch on the financial piece, which we did not address last time, and there's no other formal presentation. Mr. Lopez?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Austin. So as Dr. Austin mentioned, we're bringing this back, and the only additional item, as he said, is the fiscal impact. So the fiscal impact essentially will be the cost of 1 FTE. So the 1 FTE will be for a 0.4, and the 0.4 will be able to teach, will be for 2 periods for the sixth grade elective wheel, and then a 0.2 for 1 period in the fall and the spring for the 7th and 8th elective courses. And the 0.4 will be to serve as a TOSA. So essentially, we'll be able to support the staff in between discussions regarding content and curriculum alignment, partnership liaisons, grade level field trips, coordinating that, because it will be a little bit too difficult for the principal and the assistant principal to serve and, to wear multiple hats as it is. So we felt that it was this would be very instrumental to be able to sustain this program.
Okay, we don't have any members of the public who want to comment, so comments and questions from board members. Mr. Brienza?
I think the same goes, we all said last time, we're all really excited about this program. It looks fantastic, and I know the students are excited about it. Do you expect that the extra FTE it will be ongoing, or do you think it'll be to launch the program until they get going, or how do you see that playing out?
So we actually had the conversation earlier, Ms. Howard, you want to come up? So for the first 2 years, we see that it's going to be very, again, instrumental to roll this program out to make sure that it's consistent. And then we would revisit it again after 2 years or 3 years to see where we are and see if we can, continue it. But I'll have Ms. Howell add any additional comments.
Yeah, I think the initial idea is that it would help kind of jumpstart our program to have the option to have the additional FTE that wouldn't impact our initial staffing, as we don't know what the growth will look like in the beginning. Hoping that the growth would essentially take over that staffing, the FTE, as we grow as a school. But definitely having the option to have these offerings like a spoke in our wheel for both of our 6th grade periods, and then offer an elective for students to opt into that program as well.
If we can somewhere keep it just on the radar that, we often have programs and pathways asking for extra support, and we talk about equity of it all. So I think kickstarting a program makes total sense. But if we do decide that we need it ongoing, I think we should just remember to talk about that in 2 or 3 years to see, are there other places that, have the same sort of situation? There's just extra workload, and, how are we going to prioritize that?
Mr. Collins?
Thank you. I have two comments. One is on the idea of a themed choice school. Is that what we're calling it? As I mentioned last time, and I think others said the same, I think it's really important. I think this is a new model in Palo Alto, and though obviously not a new model in California or elsewhere. And I think potentially an important innovation, both for enrollment management and offering choices to the families in our community. And so I think it's great we're doing it, because I think it's a really good idea. But B, I think we need to make sure we explain clearly to the community what it is we're doing and how this works, and make sure we come up with a process, particularly to explain to the people in the attendance area what's going to happen at their school, and explaining to people outside the attendance area the process by which they have an option to attend this school, because it will probably look at least somewhat different from the current lottery type process or choice type process. I don't know how different it'll look, but I think it's important that we communicate that this is different than the choice programs that we currently have. And I think, and by the way, on some of the ad hoc committees, as I think people have heard, this is something that people are looking at as, hey, is this an option that we should consider for other programs? Because I think it's an interesting innovation. So that's one. Two is, I just wanted to reiterate, I hope you've gotten a lot of positive feedback on this. I hear unremitting positive feedback from people in the community. In fact, I have to tell you, I was meeting today with one of our counterparts on the city side, and just sitting at an outdoor cafe, and up comes the gentleman who's the president of the American Energy Society. And when I mentioned that we're doing this program at Fletcher Middle School, he says, "Oh my goodness, that's like wonderful. We could make every student and teacher a member of the American Energy Society. Here's my card." And I would love to be in touch with them. So I think you've really hit on, and you're the representative of the faculty and the students and all the people who developed this idea. I think you've hit on something that's really hit a resonant chord. And I don't know if anybody went to the climate summit that the city organized at Gunn High School over the weekend. There were hundreds of people there, from an assistant secretary of the Department of Energy on down to local officials, and Senator Becker was there, all talking about sustainability programs in Palo Alto. And so I really think, well, in the state and in Palo Alto. So I really think we've hit on something important here, and have the potential to really be a real innovator for both our community and California schools generally. So I'll make sure you get this card. But I just want to compliment all the people involved on finding something that's resonated so much with the community.
Ms. Latimer.
Yeah, can I just add quick to that? I don't have exciting news like a card or anything to give you, but I may have directed someone to you over email, because I've been getting contacted by parents of high school students whose high school students want to get involved, and I've had to kind of slow the reins and be like, well, we're kind of still developing the program. I don't know if they're actually ready to handle the logistics of volunteers yet, but so I sent them to you. But I do think, to Mr. Collins' point, it certainly is resonating, so I would suggest that you prepare an idea for what to do with all of the high school students who may want to walk down or bike down to Fletcher and help, because it does sound like that's going to be pretty, and I know Jung's in the room, so that connection between the high school and middle school, we have all the people here who need that I think that's going to be huge in terms of service to others too, just that connection with the schools.
I have received some emails for volunteer.
Sorry about that.
No, we will welcome them.
Any other comments or questions? Yes, Mr. Pan.
Hi, yeah, so I went to Fletcher Middle School in 7th grade to 8th grade, and listening and seeing all of the details for the plan, it sounds like it would be a very cool thing to implement at Fletcher, and I feel like it'll definitely benefit the students there, so. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have this is an item for action, so is there a motion?
I don't know.
Can I just clarify, what's the action?
So
being
the
requested
action,
here?
if you look at the recommendation, that the board approve Fletcher's sustainability themed school with a choice option for students to attend from outside their neighborhood school boundaries. So essentially,
I move
Yeah.
the board that we approve Fletcher Middle School sustainability themed school with a choice option for students to attend from outside their neighborhood school boundaries.
I second.
so it's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion, Mr. Collins?
Yeah, I just want to clarify, I mean, I'm happy to, I mean, I plan to vote for the motion and have no problem with it. It did seem to me, I was a little confused because it wasn't clear to me that this required board action, that if the school wants to say it wants to be a theme school, then it struck me that was within the staff's purview. Is that, since this may come up again, I just wanted to see if people thought differently about that.
Is it because I thought the same thing, and I wondered if it was because of the choice school part, because we're going to also put a lottery in effect? Is that why we're approving it?
So part of my job is to always think about what can go wrong. And in this particular case, it looks like a universal love fest. Okay? But, what if it wasn't? And I think it would be a mistake for us, or for our board, not to approve, bless the theme school, because there could be a time when something that was proposed ran counter to the direction of our district. And to say it's okay this time because we're excited about it but not next time, just sets us up for a bad precedent. So my recommendation was from the beginning that this probably does require action. It has a minimal financial piece, but creating a themed school is a big deal, and so that's why.
Could I just maybe make a suggestion? Were you going to say something?
I was just going to ask a question, and maybe we have the same question. So then, since we've been talking about doing more themed schools possibly, is each one going to come to us for approval? And I just think we should decide what we're doing, which is fine. I take your point that what if a school came up with a theme that as a board, we all recoiled from? It would be good.
I think to Mr. Collins' point, not only is this an exciting option for Fletcher, I think it opens some thinking about what choice schools could be, and that there could be a potential that some of the choice schools become theme schools with a choice component, or more schools become theme schools with a choice component, or theme schools without a choice component. I think the Fletcher piece really broke loose some thinking in some exciting ways. So don't want to start a frenzy right now, but yes, so in my thought, Ms. Latimer, each of those would come back.
So
Mr. Collins, yeah.
my suggestion then is, I hate to call other people's numbers, but for those of you on the board policy committee, it might, okay, it might be appropriate to look at, I forget what the board policy number that covers choice schools is, but you might want to look at that language and kind of amend it to just cover this circumstance, so the process is covered in board policy. So there's no confusion in the future about why we're doing what we're doing.
Mr. Durop.
Just to follow up on that, because we've had confusion on the BPRC before, can we consider this a direction from the board for the BPRC to look into that, put it on the matrix?
Is there still a matrix?
There's like two things on the matrix, but there is still a matrix.
Well, if we want, we can amend the motion to
Yeah, why don't we
include
do that, then that's clear.
Okay, so should I make an amendment to the motion? So I amend the motion to add that we refer to the BPRC. I don't know the number of the policy, the policy we've been discussing to capture this circumstance in the policy.
Is there a second?
A second.
Okay, is there any further discussion on that? So we'll vote first on the amendment proposed by Mr. Collins. Student board members, your preferential vote?
Aye.
Aye.
Board members, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So the motion is amended. Is there any further discussion on the motion now as amended? No. Student board members, preferential vote on the motion, which now includes the direction to the BPRC as well as the approval of the proposal.
Aye.
Aye.
Board members, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? So the motion carries.
Great.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Yeah, great.
Let's move on then to item 5B, which is the Board of Education Ad Hoc Committee to study public participation in board meetings. I'll just, let me just briefly summarize because though Dr. Austin wrote the item, this is really a board item. Mr. Durop and I were directed by the board to, the board directed me to appoint an ad hoc committee when I appointed myself and Mr. Durop to consider changes to the board's rules around public comment as part of the board's decision to adopt permanently the practice of having Zoom public comment in addition to in-person public comment. Mr. Durop and I came back with a proposal which was discussed at the August 23rd meeting, and that proposal was adopted in part, but the board didn't consider the last item on the recommendation, which was changing the maximum time for individual public comment from 3 minutes to 2 minutes. So that's what we're doing now. So this is set for action since it was discussed on August the 23rd. We have some public comment on this item, which we'll take first, and then we can have a discussion about how we want to proceed. And we have three members of the public who wish to speak, so you'll each have 3 minutes. That's Mr. Davis, Stephen Davis, followed by Terry Baldwin, followed by Meb Steiner.
Okay, thank you. All right, sorry, this is more a set of bullet points as opposed to a thesis. The voices of the community matter for the board and the district to hear, but it is important for them to be heard by other members of the public. People learn they are not alone. We, when we speak up here, are sometimes addressing complicated matters that were addressed in extended presentations, and 3 minutes is already a tough time constraint. Inaccessibility. This proposal further biases towards people who can speak English well and fast, which works for me mostly. A number of people, however, who do come to speak to the board have never done so and are often dealing with complicated problems that the district has failed to deal with. This is a false problem. Why limit general public comments to 2 minutes? Why not increase them to 5 minutes for responsive to agenda items? 30 minutes for public comment in a public meeting is a small and arbitrary figure. The board is rarely kept late, and when it does, the issues are important enough for the public to be heard, like earlier tonight. Finally, there is already a mechanism for dealing with many speakers. It works just fine. Finally, if this is to be voted on, it should be voted on by the board members and board who are going to be living with it, not at the end of a term. Thank you.
Ms. Baldwin.
Thank you. I kind of want to reiterate what the last speaker said, that when you limit it to 30 minutes per item, that does cut off some ability for other members of the community.
Yeah, it doesn't. Can you pull it a little closer? It doesn't seem to be working quite right. No, I think there's something wrong with it.
Thank you.
Ms. Baldwin, you can start over if you like.
Oh, okay.
Can we reset her time to 3 minutes?
Yeah,
to 3 minutes.
Reiterate all that. I probably won't take it, as you can tell. When I'm told to say a few words, that's what I say. Not very many. So I just feel that limiting the amount of time down to 2 minutes and limiting the full agenda to 30 minutes of public comments really cuts off community. If something does come up that's important, we should get in before the finishes. I know the 30 minutes was passed in 2017. Ever being passed myself. I don't know who was on the ad hoc committee. I don't know if educators were asked to. I wasn't in town on the 7th, June 7th, and it was created. But I really think you should reconsider this. The city, we were told, thank you. We were told that this is to do what the city does. The city is up to 3 minutes, and I've been there, and they've given 3 minutes. And then to go down with more speakers. And it does say that public comment can be limited to a total of 30 minutes, not that it would be limited. And in my experience being there with a lot of speakers, they never limited it. many times that I've been at the city council meetings. So I really wish you would look at all of the points, even the one that was previously approved, and not approve them. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Steiner.
I can definitely speak really loudly, but I will use the mic. Thank you so much for the battery change. Meb Steiner, president of CSEA. I absolutely support what Mr. Davis said in open forum and also earlier as a speaker and what Ms. Baldwin has said. We just had an election, and one of the most critical decisions that people were making was, are we a democracy? Democracy is not a spectator sport. Democracy requires, it demands active participation. And if we don't model that in a school board meeting, then we are not modeling that for our students. We have amazing student representatives. We have amazing students who are active at their schools and participating as leaders. Public comment, yes, sometimes it can be long. Sometimes it is repetitive. But that is because people are coming to express their shared values, their shared views. They are also coming to express their diverse views and their disagreement with something. I think it's really, really important that we, as an institution of education, as a board that represents a community that teaches our future leaders, our students, must be open and make our meetings accessible and absolutely promote that democracy requires participation. It is your obligation, it is your responsibility. The rights you are given, the rights you have, come with responsibility. And I really urge us to focus on that. Our civics education, our students just won a fabulous award, well-deserved. And I urge us to think about that as we structure our school board meetings, because it is an opportunity for all of our community, our students, our families, our staff, our broader community to weigh in. And we need to be modeling that. Democracy requires it of us, and I urge us to make our meetings accessible to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the public comment that we have on this item. I'll just say a couple of words about this since I was on the ad hoc committee, and then we can hear from other board members. So the reason that the committee included this recommendation in the proposal is essentially because we're expanding, I think this was the thrust of what the board was trying to do during the summer, we're expanding the opportunities for public comment fairly substantially by taking Zoom comment as well as in-person comment. And so we were looking to balance the expansion and the effect that that has on the board's time during its public meetings in order to balance that with the time that it takes to hear public comment. And I think that's a balance that is, the board is constantly engaged in, because we want both public participation and we want the opportunity to have full discussion making and have good decisions, and to do that in a way that's accessible to the public by making sure that we get through things in a way that's expeditious and we don't have meetings that go long into the night. So this was our thought about how to balance the increased access with the best use of the board's time in terms of both taking public comment and having the opportunity to make good decisions. So with that, I will open it up for board comments and questions. Mr. Durrott.
Thank you. So this was before I was on the board, before Ms. Latimer was on the board. this was voted on by the board at a governance workshop. And so I didn't have the opportunity to vote on it then, so I'm happy to talk about now why on the ad hoc committee, I believe that 30 minutes, a limitation of 30 minutes per item is reasonable. You know, folks may not know that the Brown Act, you know, why does the Brown Act allow for local government agencies to limit the time that the public participates? Well, the 1986 amendments to the Brown Act, which enshrined the right of the public to participate, they were the ones that allowed the public to comment. They also came with that amendment the right of a public agency to limit it. And the reason is, if you go back and if you are interested, like I was, to look at the legislative history of the bill and look at the notes and the comments in the Senate Committee on Local Government, well, the questions they asked were ones that were incredibly relevant to what we've seen on the board here, and they are all targeted towards furthering public participation. So, you know, what happens if there is too much time for individual speakers? If individual speakers go 3, 4, 5 minutes, then that limits the amount of time that later speakers have, because we get closer to the end of a meeting. Other items may not be able to be spoken on at length. We have a 10:30 rule on our board that says after 10:30, the board's ability to deliberate and decision make is hampered by the late hour. It's a burden on staff. We are not making decisions well. And that's why we can only vote once and by a 2/3 majority to extend meetings. So we know that as a board, we have to limit meetings somehow, and we've said 10:30 is an appropriate time to limit them. We can vote once to extend it. Within those parameters, the question then is, how do we make sure that everything on the agenda gets addressed, that the public has an opportunity to comment on every item on the agenda within the time that we've set forth as a reasonable time for us to have the meeting? That requires us to have some limits on commenting time. And it's not enough to have limits on the individual speaker time, because what could then happen, which has happened before on our board, it's happened before in city council meetings, is there'll be an item of particular interest early in the meeting, and we'll have many, many speakers. And even after it goes down to 1 minute, there will be speakers for an hour, hour and a half. And what that does, it pushes everything later. So then we get to 10 o'clock and 10:15, and we're on the third item on the agenda, and we've got students, we've got teachers, we've got parents who are now waiting until late at night to comment on an item. And then the board tables it for the next meeting because it's not able to complete the board's work during that session. That has happened before, and it used to happen a lot more often before I was on the board, but it even happened when I was on the board a few times. And so that's why parameters are important for the amount of time per item. And this isn't just me saying this. These are the questions that were raised by our state senators who drafted this right of the public to participate and the countervailing right to limit it. Because again, it wasn't so that the board could limit public access. It was in furtherance of public access, but in a manner that is fair and equitable to all the members of the public who wish to participate on all the items. So then why 30 minutes? If we know that 10:30 is sort of the benchmark that we've set for ourselves, then what's the reasonable amount of time to set per agenda item? And looking at sort of a standard agenda, if there is such a thing, we just say 2 action items, 2 discussion items. If we look at that and we say, okay, folks who want to talk, the maximum amount of time on 2 action items, 2 discussion items in open forum. That's 5 items. That's 2.5 hours. 1.5 hours is going to go by with just the business of the board, of the superintendent's report, the student's report, the board members deliberating. That's a conservative estimate, because we know that when there are no comments, we've ended around 8 o'clock, and so that's an hour and a half. Well, that puts us at 10:30. So that's, any more than that, then we're looking at in a situation where we have items of interest on which folks want to comment. We're looking at the upper end of our parameter being 30 minutes, because any more than that, then something is not going to get its due participation. Something is going to get short shrift. And yeah, that's an edge case, but of course, so is the other countervailing point is an edge case too, where there's an item that's going to have more than 30 minutes worth of comment on it. And I'll just point to a couple of things, which is the CSBA model policy, which anyone who's been on the BPRC knows we often look to that first as a presumption, and then we change things if our local practices need something more. The CSBA board policy, the model board policy on meeting conduct, 9323, it says 3 minutes per speaker and 20 minutes per item. That is optimistically 7 speakers per item maximum. Our policy allows 25, maybe a little more optimistically if Mr. Dauber is fast at calling the names, but it's upwards of 20 speakers per item, 25, maybe more than that. That's a lot of folks who get to participate. And yes, it's only a minute when you get up to that end, but if we're looking at the course of the meeting and knowing that we have these parameters that we've already set for ourselves and that we need to have some way so that everyone who comes to the meeting to talk on all the agenda items has an opportunity to do that, and we've got to set some sort of boundary. So 30 minutes to me seems reasonable. Looking through old meetings, again, I see very few instances where we do go past 30 minutes. And so for all those reasons, it seems pretty reasonable. I do think that we don't want to get into a situation where we have a permissive rule which says we can limit, because that to me is sort of rife with concerns about, First Amendment chilling, right? Why is the board deciding on this particular item with this particular set of commenters to limit the time? That is rife with problems that I wouldn't feel comfortable voting on that. So I think we need a strong process, a very clear set of guidelines that are consistently applied to every meeting. So that's, colleagues, I know there are differing thoughts, but that's my thought, my point of view.
Mr. Branza,
How did you know?
I could see you starting to talk.
Okay, well, there's 2 different things that you brought up, Mr. Drop. The first one is the one that's on the vote for tonight, right, is shrinking public comment to 2 minutes. And I realize that the purview of the ad hoc committee permitted you to take that up, but I haven't been convinced yet, because we already have in place a 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 1.5 minutes, 1 minute, depending on how many speakers there are. If it's anything that has a lot of speakers, we get down to 1 minute and 1.5 minutes pretty quickly. I haven't heard any compelling reason why we would change what our current practice has been, that it's had our meetings ending pretty early, and that if there are a lot of speakers, we're down to 1 minute each, which is what we've got in this new proposal. So I don't understand why. I mean, you said, since we're accepting a potential of more people, let's limit it more. But we've been doing that for a couple years now, and it hasn't had an impact. And there haven't been a whole lot of times that there's been a lot of speakers, and it goes down to 1 minute. So I don't know why this starting at 2 minutes instead of starting at 3 minutes. So that's one thing I'd love to continue to talk about. As for the 30-minute limit, so that was a decision made 5 years ago by a different board, and we've never put that into practice. So I feel like either this board needs to affirm that, or we need to change, we need to not start doing it. But the idea that we're going to start doing it 5 years later feels a little odd to me with a different board when we've never done it. So I would like to discuss that one. I would like us to vote on that. So I don't know, I'm curious what other people think about that.
Ms. Lanimer.
Yeah, that was a whole bunch of conversation about the content, sort of the substance of why we would limit to 30 minutes. And I was sort of back on the the preceding question of, do we get to talk about this and vote on it? Because it sounded like from the staff report that we were just sort of reverting to a rule from 2017. And I certainly have my concerns about just doing that. I think at the very least we should vote on it. But I sort of don't know where to go from here, because the way the staff report's written, like, could I make a motion that we vote, but then it wasn't agendized? Do we need to push it to next meeting? I don't know. Or I guess since I don't have a vote, then it just is the rule. I'm just sort of.
Well, and agenda setting could decide to bring it up in the future, right?
Yeah,
Agenda setting
that's true. That's true. If we're just going to proceed because that was what was decided in 2017, then we could just, agenda setting could put it back on next meeting. So that was, I mean, I can go into all the reasons why.
Well, I mean, to your point, that isn't, I think the board can always reconsider that question and vote to change the rule. And it sounds like there's some interest in doing that.
There
So
definitely is.
So I think the right thing to do, since as you're pointing out, it's not agendized, is to leave it and for a subsequent agenda and vote if you want to do that. Yeah.
That's sort of what I was thinking. Okay, so agenda setting will take up the 30-minute rule.
Right.
At
And
next
then
agenda setting.
Which leaves
Putting
us
it
with
back
just the
on
first question of of whether we're shrinking public comment to 2 minutes.
Okay.
By default. Do you have anything to say about that one?
I don't see the point. We get down to 1 minute immediately. So to me, it's just, sometimes people are talking and I think, oh, you could have said that in 2 minutes. And you're taking up the time. And then other people are like, I'm done. And then they stop. So I feel like it kind of works itself out. So I don't really see the point, but we're going to vote on it, right?
Yes. Well, let me, I can make a motion actually, since it's the committee's proposal. So, and then we can be speaking to the motion. So I move that the committee's proposal to move from 3 minutes to 2 minutes as the maximum time for public comment be adopted. Is there a second?
A second.
Mr. Collins? Yeah.
So first, let me just, sorry, I got to use my mic. First, let me just say, I don't see this as a highly dramatic, we're spending a lot of time on it, but I don't think there's a lot. 2 minutes versus 3 minutes is not going to have dramatic impact, certainly on the current board. I do think one of the things I always think about, and I appreciate Mr. Durop's historical context, is that what we're really doing is setting the conditions for future boards that may well be under different circumstances than the one we're in, just as ours is in quite different circumstances than 5 years ago when this board governance committee met to try to address what at the time were very serious concerns about our ability to balance the public's business with gathering public comment. And we can recall Mr. Dauber sitting on the board during meetings that I remember going out, being at the meeting in the public, going out for dinner over at Town and Country and coming back with public comment still continuing on the same item well over an hour later. And that was not uncommon in those days. So I think, we're not, the circumstances we have in front of us, we are always top of mind, but we have to keep in mind those circumstances may well be different, and we're setting the conditions under which future boards will also act. Personally, I think it's good that we've made Zoom commenting a permanent feature. I do think that's really important for giving people access, though it brings some risk with it. And I expect it will bring more public comment on every topic, and that's a good thing. But I do think we have to be mindful that we're balancing, as Mr. Dauber said, two important goods: getting public input and making sure that the board can efficiently conduct the public's business, including getting public comment on future items that haven't yet come up on the agenda. We redid, that governance session in 2017, reset that balance, and we got a bunch of negative criticism at the time. When we limited, at that time, everybody got 3 minutes regardless of how many speakers there were. And there was no limit in the total amount of public comment. And there were a number of people who thought that we were having a chilling effect on public comment by just putting in the things that we've lived with.
I remember being one of those people that concerned. I was worried.
And I think most of us, I can't speak for everybody, but I think many of us think that we ended up improving results, both for better governance and better public input as a result. So I think there's a chance to do that here too. There's nothing magic about 3 minutes. I was checking earlier today and I found a number of bodies across the state and across the country that had 5-minute limits. So that seems to be the standard actually in a number of states. At the other end of the spectrum, I've had the occasion this year to comment at a couple of state Board of Education meetings. There, regardless of the number of speakers, the public comment time is always set at 1 minute. And I can also note, for those of you who have heard my email plea, none of our 11 state board members ever respond to emails. So email, you don't do any better when you email them. So I think this is a judgment call, and I think we've heard people on both sides. My judgment is that I support the recommendation of the ad hoc committee, and I think it helps, that slight adjustment will help us maintain an effective balance. And not so much for this board, but I think for boards in the future that may be operating under different circumstances.
I just want to add one thing, and I'm not sure if it's a question for maybe or for the lawyers on the board or the Brown Act experts. We just went through like 2 years I mean, it was months and months of meetings talking about school reopenings and closures. And the 30-minute limit was never once invoked or even mentioned and waived.
We forgot about it.
Right, so I'm a little concerned, I mean, to your point about, I don't want to have a rule where it's like we can ignore it when we want to. I feel like we just ignored it for 5 years. And now all of a sudden we're like, oh, we're putting it back in place. And I just have to say, and I get it, we'll take it up with agenda setting, but this just kind of feels like a bait and switch to me. I'm not comfortable that this is what we're doing right now to the community. And it just feels like we're not, this is why the community starts to mistrust governmental bodies when things like this happen. So maybe this is irrelevant because we're going to put it on agenda setting and talk about it, so we may not even have a meeting or more than one or two that passes. But I do want to put that out there. I think everything that everybody said, I agree, but it's been 5 years. And COVID, I mean, there were hundreds of speakers, hours and hours. This was never mentioned. So I'm a little worried that we're, the whole chilling freeze, why now? Why was that okay and not in the future? So I'm glad that I'm hoping we'll take it up soon.
If I can just, I want to just address that specifically because it sounds like you're raising a question about whether there was anything nefarious there. Since I was the board president during the year that we had hundreds of speakers, and I was also the original proposer of the 30-minute rule in 2017, I can tell you the reason that it wasn't brought up is that it did not get instantiated in board policy. There was somewhere along the line, there was a clear vote. It was in the minutes of the meeting from that 2017 meeting that said the board had passed this limit, but that did not get instantiated in board policy. So when I, as president, conducted the board, nobody's trying to pull a fast one here. And I think you correct the mistake rather than make my mistake policy.
I would argue your mistake was good for. There you go. I think it let the community get out of it that wouldn't have happened otherwise. But I think anything nefarious happened. I think this that we're doing it.
If I can just say, the board president, the board has the right to waive the rules. So it's not like this is
To waive the rules.
to waive. It's not a procrustean bed, right? So if the board decided, hey, in the interest of everybody have their say, let's waive the minute rule and let people talk for as long as they need, that's all in the authority of the board. So this is one of the things we found. It's like boards, we had a rule before we set a minute, 2 minute, 3 minute rule. We had said the board president or the board to limit the amount of talk. Never happened. Because it's never gonna, you're never gonna turn the dial down, you're only gonna turn it up. Yeah. So that's why I think having conservative rules that can be dialed up is better than having liberal rules that required being dialed down, because in the moment, you'll never dial it down.
So it sounds like the right next step on the 30-minute rule is to bring it to agenda setting, and it'll probably get put on the board's agenda, and then the board can sit at that point and take action to change if they want to. I do agree that if it is a policy that was passed by the board, even if it wasn't observed, that lack of observance doesn't sort of silently repeal it. It needs to be either observed or repealed, rather than left in that state. Student board members, comment on so the motion is on the 2 minute, 3 minute to 2 minute change.
Yeah, I wanted to say something, but it was a little hard to join the discussion. I think hearing it, I feel like all these concerns are very valid, and like wanting to balance efficiency and getting through a lot of people. I really see that, and I think like it can be hard to understand it as like student or a public member, like all of the logistical complications that come with that. I understand that. And I also am really grateful that the board has made a lot of steps to ensure that these voices are heard, especially student voices, putting them at the very front of public comment. I really appreciate that. And a little bit of context, I joined board meetings and I joined student council during the online year and COVID. So I got to witness a lot of those really long meetings. And my experience is that, before being a board rep and being required to be here in person, it was really difficult for me to get here. And all of my public comments were on Zoom. They were all timed. And what I would do is I would open a document, I would draft it out, I would edit it like an English student, and I would time it just to make sure that it was under time. And it was very demanding, especially for someone who is not in the student council at all, who is just an average student who, probably just got home from school, probably just finished their math homework and wants to be part of a public board meeting. And they probably don't have the luxury or time for that. And also, a lot of students may not feel comfortable speaking in front of a lot of people and might need that more time and buffer, even if they don't use all 30 minutes, to just allow them to speak freely without feeling like someone's like breathing down their neck or anything. I just want to say, I really understand the need for efficiency and the need for expanding voices, but I think given that not everyone even uses the full 3 minutes and there's usually not more than 15 speakers, I think it's not urgent to reduce the number to 2 minutes, and it's actually much more beneficial and increases that morale to have it with 3 minutes, just have that buffer and have that opportunity. And I think, we as student board members also have a responsibility to work with students at our site levels and ensure that they feel like they can speak freely and that they also know that they're welcome to speak here. I think that can be a work on us, but, for right now, I really want to keep the 3 minutes, and I know I have a preferential vote, but I would vote no on this motion, and I hope that you understand my perspective.
Mr. Pan, did you have comments?
Yeah, kind of just to echo what Johanna said. I feel like all of the worries are definitely valid, like making it efficient, having something that can be dialed, or something that can be opposed later when it comes as a problem. I can all see that, but I do have to agree with Johanna on this one. I feel like I don't really see an urgent reason to decrease the speaking time to 2 minutes. I've been here only for a while, but I don't see our speakers going past the 3 minute mark that often. And I feel like Johanna raises a good point. A lot of our students do get a bit nervous speaking in front of the board. So I feel like having that buffer time would be very beneficial for them. So, yeah.
Any further comments or questions? From my perspective, I think those are all legitimate concerns. My reason for supporting the proposal and as part of the ad hoc committee and also as part of today is that I think that having expanded the opportunity for public comment, which I think was the board's decision, and I think it was made for good reasons, I think we need to take action to protect the ability of the board as times change and as people take advantage of that to still get the work done over the course of the session. So that's why I'm supporting the motion. I can see the sentiments on both sides. If there's no further comment, we'll vote. Student board members, preferential vote?
I vote no.
I vote no.
Board members, all in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
So the motion passes by a vote of 3-2. And we will move on to the next item, which is item 5C, the authorization to award a contract for relating to Escondido.
Mr. Dauber, do we want to take a short break, or should I just step out? Either way.
No, let's do that. We don't usually get this late, but let's take a 5-minute break and we'll resume at 8:40.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, let's resume our meeting, and the next item on the agenda is item 5C, relating to construction at Escondido School. Mr. Holm, is this yours?
Good evening. So tonight we have the authorization to award the contract for the Escondido Administration Multipurpose Building Project to Sasso Corporation for $20,560,000. Also authorize superintendent to approve change orders amount of 10% and approve the increase in the project budget of $6.9 million for a total project budget of $27.8 million. For the bid, we had 4 contractors, so we had good bid coverage. There was a bid protest that we reviewed and deemed was not viable to reject bids. So we recommend going forward with the bid from Sasso.
Comments or questions from board members? So help me with the 2-meeting rule and its application to this. Did we discuss these bids at a previous meeting?
We discussed going out for a bid.
Right.
And we discussed this project about 7 times.
This is the way we've been handling
Okay.
this. If we discuss going out to bid first, we've counted that as the first.
Okay. All right,
Pretty
that makes
routinely.
Mr. Durab, you
I'll
have a
also say,
perspective on this. Yeah.
that's the exact exception, or that's the exact language in the.
Got it, okay. All right, thank you for that. We have a public speaker on this item before we take action, and that's Carlos Duran in person. Mr. Duran.
Good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, and board members. My name is Carlos Duran. I'm a field representative with the NorCal Carpenters Union here in San Jose in Santa Clara County at locals 405 and 9144. I represent close to 36,000 members in Northern California. Close to 4,000 of those members live in this county. As a representative, I speak for all of our members when I say we are disappointed and concerned that for the second time in recent months, Palo Alto Unified School District has decided to award a contract to another deficient bid from Sasso Corporation. I am here to speak against awarding the Escondido Elementary School contract, let alone raise the valuation of the contract, for the following reasons. From a legal standpoint, we were surprised last time, given our bid advisory, in the context of the Gunn High School contract, that the board decided to proceed in awarding this contract to Sasso. Our bid advisory documented the many legal issues with this bid's responsiveness, as well as Sasso's checkered history as a responsible contractor, which should not be ignored. This time, we are more than surprised. We are alarmed that the board seems to be bending over backwards to award Sasso another substantial contract, despite a clearly deficient bid. We are aware that a formal bid protest from the second lowest bidder made the district aware of a number of issues with Sasso's bid. Instead of engaging with these issues meaningfully, the board appears to have decided to again largely ignore these responsiveness issues. Ultimately, the board even relied on an engineer's estimate to validate Sasso's proposal. It is well known that such estimates are often out of step with economic reality. And indeed, the estimate the board relied upon is unrealistic against the backdrop of current market conditions. We are also aware and have reviewed the very detailed bid leveling spreadsheet which formed part of this bid protest. It clearly showing how greatly deficient Sasso's bid was, and we haven't seen any evidence that the board has meaningfully reviewed or engaged with this material. It showed that Sasso has 50% less funds to cover the same amount of non-subcontracted work as the next lowest bidder. On top of that, in their response to the bid protest, we were aware that Sasso actually admitted to their lack of knowledge as to the scope of work, this being the case with regards to the sheet metal.
You're out of time. Can you just wrap up? You've had probably well over 3 minutes at this point. We're having a little trouble with our timer because I think we just made a change in our timing, and so.
Oh, that
I
took
was-
effect tonight? I thought it was going to
it's a
take
little,
effect
that's why I let you go on beyond 2 minutes, because it's.
beyond 2 minutes. I thought I had 3 minutes.
You
So
do have three-
What you guys just voted on takes
It's-
effect tonight?
You've had more than 3 minutes, because I thought it was unreasonable for you to only get 2 minutes, because that's a quick change with not much
Okay, well,
notice.
like the student board said, I kind of, planned it out and edited to make sure I had 3
Can you
minutes.
take another 10 seconds to wrap up?
I'll wrap it up. In sum, for whatever reason, the district is bending over backward to award this project to Salsa Corps, and we are here tonight to express our concerns as to this developing pattern. We are against this contract being awarded, let alone the valuation being right to a contractor with their reputation and who keeps submitting deficient bids. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Brands, did you?
I was gonna ask a question.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. This is not my area of expertise, so I'm not gonna get into it in a way that I don't understand. But Mr. Holm, can I ask you 2 quick questions? Sure. One, have you consulted with the attorney you consult with about this
Yes.
bid? And are they comfortable with the recommendation you're making to us tonight?
They said there's no legal basis to reject this also bid.
And, okay. And 2, more of a curiosity question here, but in the time that we've been doing work with Saucel, have we ever not accepted Saucel's bid?
They have not been the lowest bidder every time. There has been times there have been lower contractors.
And we have gone with the lower contractor
That
instead
is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up question? My understanding of the way public procurements work is that if we reject a bid without a legal basis to do so, then we are probably legally on the hook.
That is
Is that
correct.
correct? So it would probably expose us to liability at this point if we did not approve Saucel's bid.
That is correct.
Mr. Collins?
Mr. Holmes, I know Saucel has worked with our district on a number of projects over the bond program the last, now, 14 years.
Yes.
Have any idea how many projects they've done?
I don't know the exact answer. I know it's more than one project that they've previously completed for us.
Yeah.
And they are currently contracted on 2 other projects.
And putting aside bid legal processes and so on, what's been our experience? Have they delivered on time and on budget? Have we been satisfied with the work that's been delivered?
I don't know the exact timeliness or budgetness, but they have been performed satisfactorily on all of our jobs that they've performed on.
Okay. Well, I know from my experience on the Bond Oversight Committee and then on the board that I don't believe I can't recall any project that exceeded the change order allowance of 10%. So that would include the projects they're on. So we haven't had significant, I don't know of any projects that have had significant kind of misbid, the one we had was, I can't remember the name of it was probably before your time. There was one over at Pally where it wasn't Saucel, it was somebody else who exited the construction business and kind of left us in the lurch. That was the only project I can recall that ever ran into trouble. Yeah, it was before you. And Mr. Robert probably remembers it.
Yeah, I don't remember the details.
But it wasn't, okay. So our experience, to the extent that you're familiar with it, has been satisfactory.
That's correct. The last completed job was the Addison job, and they did not exceed 10% change orders. They're currently on the Palo Verde job, and we have very low change orders to date.
Okay, so would you accept a motion, Mr. Dauber?
Yes.
So I move that we authorize the award and approve the change orders and authorize the increase in the project budget as presented in the item.
Second.
Is there any further discussion on this item? Student board members, preferential vote? Oh, I apologize. Go ahead and if you have a comment. Yeah.
I guess I'm not sure if this is exactly the time to ask, but I want to clarify what we're voting on just so I can make an informed decision. I think as a student, it can be hard to wrap my head around issues that I've never been involved with, such as constructions and bids. So I guess I just would like one of the board members, if you could, explain maybe in lay terms what we're approving? Just, I want to make sure that my votes are authentic and genuine.
Sure. So this is a motion to award a contract to this construction company for the amount in the item, which is $20,560,000, to authorize the district essentially to approve change orders if there are anything comes up in the process of construction that requires, greater expenditures, but up to a limit of 10% of the contract. So not unlimited, but limited to $2,056,000. And then to approve an increase in the project budget, which is basically the difference, as I understand it, between what the pre-bid estimate was and what we currently understand, essentially for the, to accommodate the successful bid plus the change orders. So that's, do I have that right? Yeah, okay.
And then a follow-up question, if that's okay. How would specifically awarding the contract to the Sawsall Corporation impact the community? I think for me, I just want to understand the concerns around that, since I am having a bit of trouble just comprehending the technical aspects of the motion.
Ms. Latimer, do you want to
So
respond?
the context of this is we put a project out to bid. It looks like we got 4 contractors who bid on it. Sawsall Corporation is the lowest bidder, and we're required as a public agency to award the contract to the lowest bidder, presuming they meet all the bid specifications and bid requirements. There was another contractor that submitted a bid protest, said that they did not meet all the requirements. We ran it by our lawyer. Our lawyer said they did. We're therefore required, without any extenuating circumstances, to award it to the lowest bidder. So I don't know if that answers your question.
I appreciate the clarification. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, any further comments or questions? Okay, so the motion is to authorize the staff to award the contract and so forth as set forth in the item. Student board members, your preferential vote?
Aye.
Aye.
Board members, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is under item 7, staff reports. 7A, the PAUSD promise mid-year snapshot.
This will begin with Mr. Bahadur.
Thank you, Dr. Austin. Tonight, Dr. Che and I would like to provide you with a quick update on the PAUSD promise that we are calling a mid-year snapshot. Throughout the year, we have been gathering feedback from staff, students, and stakeholders for input on the goals as well as for the development of the promise moving forward. Next slide. Speaking of feedback, what this slide represents is comments from students and staff. Our student and staff voices have been very powerful, and I won't read them all, but you can see that we have several comments that we've chosen that directly correlate to the 5 focus areas that we'll address tonight. So I want to start with the first promise goal, which is serve and celebrate others. This promise goal focuses on investing in service to others, as well as celebrations that positively impact peers, colleagues, and the broader community. The 3 examples we'd like to share with you this evening are at the district, community, and state level. The PAUSD Builders Initiative was designed to be a recognition of peers, colleagues, and stakeholders who make a difference. The Builders theme kicked off the start of the school year, and we are bringing it forward throughout the entire year. We have also a dedicated website to acknowledge the individuals who have been recognized throughout the year. At the community level, we want to continue building the connection and awareness of the many programs and activities that our students are involved with. A recent example of this is Art in Unusual Places that highlighted the work of our visual and performing arts students at the Stanford Mall. And lastly, at the state level, we are very proud to celebrate the Outstanding School District Award of the Seal of Civic Engagement. Over 900 graduating seniors demonstrated excellence and participation in civics education. Moving on to the next promise goal, number 2, mental health and wellness. PAUSD has made a commitment to mental health and wellness by expanding our efforts with additional staff. At the elementary level, we have added mental health and wellness associates to work with our psychologists and counseling teams for expanded services. At our middle schools, we have also added staff and increased the hours of wellness centers so there's greater access for students. And then finally, at the high school, we've been working towards transitioning more of our services and supports to an in-house model. We have been very focused on building a team of professionals that can assist students in need. This team includes our administrators, counselors, psychologists, health staff, behavior team, and wellness outreach workers. We know that our students interact with a wide range of staff, and it is important that we take an aligned approach to supporting them. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Che to share our efforts related to the other 3 priority goal areas.
Our next goal is early literacy. The Every Student Read initiative strives to reach the goal of all students reading at grade level by the end of 3rd grade. Looking at the data, we're very happy to report that our 3rd grade ESRI groups show significant increase on aspect reading this year and surpassed the 3% goal compared to the pre-pandemic results. The second progress indicator highlights the growth of the subgroups outlined on the chart. We're proud to share that our efforts have made a difference for students in these subgroups. Equity and excellence continue to be integrated in all of our work. Regardless of student demographics or background, our schools embrace uniqueness, strength, and challenges with support of every student and encourage them to succeed. These efforts are happening throughout the district. One example is the SWIFT plan that systematically transforms our work around equity. To shine light on a few things, PAUSD has been partnering with Facing History to reflect and improve our practices. Another aspect of equity and access for all students is providing free breakfast and lunch. Our food services team is working hard to make healthy options available to students, including A to Z salad bar. In terms of learning and instruction, we use multi-tier system of support to improve student achievement, including Tier 1 classroom supports, intervention checklists, and referrals. Our dual enrollment program provides college credit to our high school students. Our participating number grew by 50% this year. We currently have about 350 students enrolled, and the program is projected to grow about 40% next year. It has been a pleasure working with Foothill to offer college credit to students at no cost. Finally, we want to provide safe and healthy school environment to all of our students. Attendance is a strong predictor of student success. PAUSD developed a healthy attendance matrix, promoting positive reinforcements and relationship-based early intervention and strategies. We also have targeted outreach for several groups, including our Pacific Islander, Black African American, Hispanic, and special education students. In addition to targeted outreach, creating an inclusive environment and also improve attendance, as we have seen with our special education secondary program students. It is important to celebrate each student's individual strength and talents. This concludes our mid-year PAUSD Promise Snapshot Report, and I'd like to turn it back over to Mr. Badar Singh.
All right, thanks, Dr. Shea. So in summary, the PAUSD Promise should be viewed as a living and evolving document that capitalizes on our dedicated staff, feedback of our stakeholders, and relationships that collectively contribute to the success of our students. While we spent a few minutes highlighting accomplishments and activities, I also want to take a moment to talk about what is ahead and our next steps. We will continue to gather feedback and evaluate our progress. This will be done through our leadership team, extending to our schools and community, as well as our partnerships with PTAC and PI. Our ad hoc committees are also a great source of information and feedback. We also realize the importance of ensuring that all of our stakeholders are aware of the goals of the PAUSD Promise, and we'll continue to expand our outreach and share the purpose and goals. That concludes our presentation of our mid-year snapshot.
Thank you. Comments or questions? Oh, actually, I believe we have a comment from a member of the public, so let's go there first. Mr. Davis, Stephen Davis. And let's I'm going to exercise some discretion, and let me just finish.
This will be really quick.
You don't have more than 2 minutes? Okay, that's fine.
So please, I actually, in one of the other charts somewhere tonight. I saw that you included the gross numbers for everything as well, which I asked as an aside last time, and I appreciate that it was done. I hope that is continuing to be done systematically. The other comment is, please, when you're showing performance for, especially for students that aren't doing well, that you show overall numbers, not just change percentages. None of you and I have no great intuition for understanding second derivatives when we look at charts, and that's what we're doing here. And it's disconcerting, and people go, oh, we improved 20% from 5%. It's not very significant. And that's not what those numbers are here, but that's the kind of thing that can be very deceptive. Finally, please start explicitly showing disproportionality of performance. The math is pretty straightforward to show where the bulk of our groups that aren't doing well are doing. It changes how you look at these numbers. Thank you.
Thank you. Comments and questions from board members? Anything, Mr. Collins?
Just briefly, first, thank you to the staff for the report. I think my sense is the substance, I mean, this was a quick flyover of the multiple priorities of the promise. I think we have now arranged that we get 2 in-depth reports on each one of these things at our meetings over the course of the year, and that's where I would expect the more substantial discussion and more substantial data to be. So I appreciate this kind of overview, because not everybody has the context, and it's useful to provide it, but that's where I would expect the substance of the discussion to be. Is that right, Dr. Austin? Is that the intention? All right.
Anyone else? Mr. Brienza.
Well, I agree. There's just few little comments. Just so excited to see the Seal of Civic Engagement and what percentage of our students are graduating with it, and the recognition that we got for it. It's fantastic, and the way that it's embedded into just their high school experience is tremendous. I'm really excited about it. For ESRI, did we just see SBAC because that's what came out now, and our iReady/BAS measure, that the third measure, we see a different time of the year? We're just looking, okay. I love that the A to Z salad bar is coming back, because so many parents have been so frustrated by the necessity for prepackaged stuff during the pandemic and trying to feed everyone. So starting to see that stuff come back, I think, is going to make everyone really happy. Finally, just about attendance, we talked about it last time. I just want to make sure that we are very careful of the difference between correlation and causation, and that I am sure that when you are here more often, you are going to do better. But sometimes students aren't doing well because they're not here, and other times they aren't doing well and they're not here because of something else. And really getting at the reason why they're not here, just instead of just focusing our attention of like, let's get them here, trying to really figure out why are they not here, and that really might be why they're not doing well. So I hope that as we continue this important work, we're not just thinking of the end goal of getting them here, but hopefully the end goal of what is stopping them from being successful, both showing up here and doing well in their classes. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you so much for the report. It's great to see the progress across all of these areas, and I look forward to following along with future reports. Next item on our agenda is under staff report 7B, secondary school student performance report for Q1 of this school year. Dr. Austin?
Yeah, we're pretty excited. This report is an evolution from the straight DF report. And Mr. Lopez will start in just a second. We'll explain how we got into this evolution. It really went, several people had a hand in this effort, starting with just trying to better understand what we were looking at. And we had an incomplete picture. And it was in front of us, but until we really dug in, we didn't even attempt to make meetings. So tonight's report is an evolution, and we'll be interested in some feedback. I'll also say that some of these are descriptive data points that we're not trying to assign meaning to everything that you're going to see tonight. So some of these are data points that are going to lead to more questions. And finally, when it comes to grading practices vary across our district, and you're going to see some evidence of that tonight, and that is not unique to our school district. And one thing I want to make clear is I don't think that there's a recommendation that everyone is doing exactly the same thing when it comes to grading, but there are some best practices and some things that are included in our SWIFT plan as well, where I'm encouraged about some movement, and I'm additionally encouraged because it's been pretty grassroots. With that comes some good progress and some inconsistency. So not all good, not all bad, but again, we're excited to present this report to you tonight, Mr. Lopez.
Thank you, Dr. Austin. So before I get started, I just wanted to kind of mention some of the items that Dr. Austin said, that it was really a team effort between myself and Ms. Conway, but also with the help of Mr. Moore. He was able to give us access to the platforms, but also to kind of dig in deep and to really have a better understanding as to the differing grading practices that we've had. And as I move along, I'm going to show you some of those items that we discovered. So the first item that we're going to look at, so along with the D's and F's, we want to also look at incompletes, no marks, and pass, and to really understand what that meant. And as we were having those conversations with our principals in secondary, I think they also realized themselves that even within the school, each department was utilizing them differently, especially the P's. So at the quarter grades, and some of the conversations that we're having is so what does that P mean? Does that mean that the student's performing high or is it performing low? So the way that they're going to be following up as they're having those conversations with their staff is going to be really to understand what is the conversation happening with the students, how they know where they stand, but also with the parents. So that's where, this really caught our eye as we were looking at the different letters that were being utilized along with D's and F's. The next item we were looking at is the influencers. This is definitely one that caught our attention. As we know, chronic absenteeism is definitely a reason why students receive a letter F, but when we looked at the data here within our district, so students are 7.5 times more likely to receive an F. The second one was socioeconomic disadvantaged students that was 6 times more likely to receive an F, but the one that for me personally stood out is, if you're Hispanic, you're 5 times more likely to receive an F. So that's definitely something that I know with our principals and even with our counselors. We're having a conversation with them on Thursday in our meeting. What are we doing to provide that support for our students? And this is one that was definitely an eye-opener. So this allowed us to really look and dig deeper. So if you look at the middle graph, the first item is a Hispanic student. So basically on the information that we get here, it says that students, Hispanic students have a 50-50 chance of receiving a no mark and an F. Where the next row over is white students, they have a 2-to-1 chance to, 2 meaning they're gonna get, they have twice the chances to receive a no mark and 1 chance to receive an F. Next row over is our students, Asian students. They have 2.5 chances to receive a no mark compared to one option for an F. So overall, really what this says is that based on this information, if you're students, if they're white or Asian, they're twice as likely to receive a no mark over an F when compared to Hispanic students. So this definitely, it ignited some conversations with our principals, and again, this is just follow-up conversations that we're going to be having as we move forward as to what is being done, within our classes, especially with the counseling team. So, Ms. Conway, I'll go ahead and control the.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I recognize that the data here is not very glamorous unless you're a data geek like I am, but there's definitely some opportunity for more exploration of our data. But I really wanted to celebrate a few of our positive notes that we did glean from the data. And first, I do have to recognize, though, that the data that we see has gone through this evolution thanks to our chief technology officer, who's always looking for ways to present data in a more meaningful way, as you can see by the addition of the influencers tab and the addition of the by department, by course breakdown as well. But most notable, that's easy to get lost in the data that we're seeing, is that 92% of the grades that we assign are no lower than a C. 55% of those grades are A's. So over half of our students are consistently getting A's. Over half of our grades assigned are A's. So we have a lot to celebrate, and our students should be, congratulated for the positive work that they're doing, and our teachers should be congratulated for the great teaching and learning that's happening in the classroom. What's notable also, and this is through discussions with site staff and with administrators, is that there is a recognition that there are some areas in our grading practices for improvement. So while we, like many school districts and educators, have stuck to the traditional way of grading for many years, we're now starting to have some conversations about what evidence-based grading practices really look like and how we can best support our students with our practices. And as you can see in the board report, each site principal has presented a plan for addressing those grades that are falling below the DF mark. And now there is a conversation about what is an incomplete and a no mark and what that means for the students in terms of their mastery of material. But along with those successes, there are a few challenges, obviously, and one is we can still see that there is a link between demographics and outcomes, and that's the link we have been trying to disrupt and sever for many years now, and I feel like we are doing the work to make progress on that. But there's definitely some more work needed, and the recognition of that is benefiting us in the conversation. There also needs to be some time spent on really understanding what our grading practices are across the district, not just at one school, but across all sites, so that we can ensure that students and families understand how how grades are assigned, and that those grades, are really a marker of the mastery that students have achieved, and not some other factors that could be considered some soft skills like attendance, homework, behavior. So those things are important to discuss. And also, it's important for us to continue to examine some of the traditional grading practices that we are using. Some of those work. So this is not a suggestion that we throw out the old and bring in the new. This is a suggestion that we really take a look and understand what kind of grading practices we are using. And then finally, these are just some general recommendations, and these are things that are already in the works. They're not new, and I didn't make them up. But we certainly do need to continue to have a focus on our data collection and analysis. The data you saw presented today was in raw numbers. Some of the work that our site leaders will have to do is around understanding what that means in terms of the performance as we disaggregate the data for our students of color, for our students from low-income background, and students with disabilities, so that we can ensure that we are looking at our grading practices in the lens of equity and responding to that in a meaningful way. And also making sure that there's a clear understanding by teachers of those best practices in grading. There's work and there's science out there that's there already. We don't have to recreate the wheel, but there are some things that we do know works in the classroom regarding grading. And standards-based grading is one that's come up. It's a sensitive topic for some. And the recommendation is that we just continue to explore the value of standards-based grading in our district. And obviously that has to come with really strong input from our stakeholders. That's from students, parents, teachers, because all have, a vested interest in this. And some of the feedback we've received around the stress around homework and the stress around some other things really has us asking questions about how our grading practices may play into that. And then finally, it's important for us to communicate and share what our vision is for teaching and learning and how our grading practices align with that. There's some work to do, but I am confident that our site team leaders are already on it. So I expect to see that there are more conversations about this in the future. And with that, I will turn it back over to the board.
Thank you very much. We have a couple of public comments. So what I'd like to do is to leave it at 3 minutes for this evening, because our commenters haven't had notice of the change. Thank you so much. And we'll start with Stephen Davis in person and then start teach out on Zoom. Mr. Davis?
The real question is this, will this work? So I looked at those charts, and there is no data given for students with disabilities. So I'll say that again, because I've got 3 minutes to say it. No data for students with disabilities. That says something about priorities and focus. Okay, the number we had a little while ago was that the college and life readiness for students with disabilities was sorely lacking, and we have no data for students with disabilities on grading. Students with disabilities become adults with disabilities, and they have a 40% employment gap versus non-disabled people, 40%. So overall employment's around 70, 75%, and it's around 30, 35% for students, for adults with disabilities. And we have no data on grading for students with disabilities. That's a statement about values and priorities.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Ms. Teachout on Zoom. Oh, and then also after Ms. Teachout is Sarah Woodham, also on Zoom.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for giving some attention to improving our grading practices, especially with regards to the no mark and the passing. I wanted to add 4 tangential comments which might improve the interpretation of the data. One, when a student receives a no mark or an I for a class, there is some amount of time allowed to resolve it. I don't know what that is for a no mark. For an I grade, it is, I believe, a semester. I don't recall us reporting the resolution of those marks in our data. I don't know whether they're all being lumped in with the next semester's data, but it might be interesting to separate out that data to know how many of the no marks and I's are being resolved. And secondly, it would be really great if we could somehow report the data when for some of our students who we have a low number of students. So often when we're looking at some of our big data, there will be no data. There'll be an asterisk for a group of students because we don't have enough students in that group and we don't want to compromise their privacy. So if there can be some way for us to ratio those students so that we can get a sense of how they're doing, it would be really nice. Thirdly, as a long-term substitute teacher, and I've heard this from other teachers, sometimes students just don't want to work in class. They'll just say to me or other teachers, I'll take summer school. And it would be really nice if we could find out what their reasons are for that. Is it that their classes are smaller? Do they have friends there? Is it more homogenous? Is it a more relaxed environment, slower pace, etc.? So it'd be nice to dig into that. And then lastly, ideally, all schools in our athletic leagues would have the same start time. Right now, there are many students who are struggling students who leave class. They'll miss 1 or 1.5 class periods when they have an athletic competition. So that's another problem that we have to think about. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Ms. Woodham on Zoom.
Hi. I appreciate the comments earlier because I did also notice that special ed wasn't included in these graphs, but and so I think that's definitely something we should try and include in doing this analysis, as we move forward. But I really actually wanted to acknowledge that, we've had this DF report for several years. And I do want to say that I truly, truly appreciate that we've peeled another layer of this onion and to try and understand, this no mark, incomplete scenario. I was my second kid deep into high school before I even knew that was a thing. And so, that whole question about, who offers it, consistency, just how you navigate that, from an equity point of view is really important. So the whole conversation here, I've found just really useful, and I appreciate that we're doing the work. And, Ken, since it's your last, bit on the board, I mean, it also makes me reflect back to, sort of, let's say when you started, there wasn't even I don't think at that point, a DNF list that was being analyzed data-wise. And so, just listening to this, I actually kind of see how far we've come, and appreciate just this whole conversation makes me feel like we're in a much better place to move forward. So thanks for that.
Thank you. Comments and questions from board members. Mr. Branza?
Thank you so much for this report. I really thank you all for this report. Kind of what Ms. Woodham said, it's just peeling back another layer. And these data are crushing in some ways. And I imagine when staff looked them over, when your principals and leadership teams looked them over, they were probably also horrified and really upset by it. The fact that ethnicity plays an impact on what kind of grade you get. The fact that we named it means that we can start to work on it. And here we are, 2022, 2023 school year. You guys are doing it. You guys are doing exactly what needs to happen. I'm gonna cry. This is what we knew existed in this district and probably exists everywhere. And it's so hard to find it if you don't know exactly where to go looking. And you all dug deeper. We've had this DF list for years and we didn't look at it this way. And you all looked at it this way and found more opportunity for us to improve and found reasons why it's not a kid's fault, some of the outcomes they're getting in our district. It's our fault, the outcomes that they're getting. And it's what many have long suspected, and you are pulling out these data. And we have a moral and legal responsibility to do better by these kids. And I think that you all have really hit on the first step to really dismantling some of what our problem is here. And I'm grateful for it. I'm here for it. And I'm sure that you're not going to be able to do it as fast as any of us would like, as fast as we need to, but heading in the right direction, and all of us heading in the right direction and continuing to talk about it and work at it on the sites and bring it up here, and know that if there's something, a change that needs to be made to a SWIFT goal or PD that needs to happen or something, I am here for it, and I am very, very, very grateful that we are naming it. Thank you.
Other comments? Ms. Ledemarick?
Yeah, I want to echo everybody's thanks, really, to staff for evolving and digging deeper into this data. The first thing I thought when I looked at this report was, I thought about this narrative that we sometimes hear, that our focus on equity is counterproductive because what it does is lower expectations for certain groups of students, when what we should be doing is raising expectations for all students. And this narrative has always confused me, because to me, equity work is the opposite of this. It's about leveling the playing field. It's about removing barriers to accessing education that confront certain groups of students and not others. So, I hope it's obvious that being 5.22 or 4.39% more likely to receive an F, those are examples of barriers. I hope that's obvious. And I also, the second thing I thought about when I saw this report is that I actually think this report shows that we do have different expectations for different groups of students. Specifically, we appear to have kinder, gentler, more forgiving expectations for white and Asian students. As Mr. Lopez noted, the data tells us that we're giving them more no marks and incompletes. We're giving them more opportunities to turn in stuff late, to revise stuff, to prove what they can do. We cut them some slack. We give them the benefit of the doubt, which is fine. That's great. What's not fine is that we aren't doing that for their Latino and Black and Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander peers. It's not a level playing field. That's my first point. Which connects to my second point, which I'm a little bit hesitant to even bring up because I can just see my email exploding, but it feels slightly irresponsible not to. You know, it's very likely, given the case that's currently pending at the Supreme Court, that every college in this country is soon going to be prohibited from considering a student's race in any way during the admissions process. And I'm not bringing this up to debate the merits of that issue, but to make the point that this report is showing us that race matters when it comes to academic achievement in our schools. It's not about intent. It's not about any school or teacher intentionally using different standards for different groups of students, but impact is what's relevant here. And the impact is that our school districts we're giving white and Asian students a head start. We're putting our thumb on the scale. And it's true. Like Dr. Austin said, we are not the only district doing this. And I think it's also true that reasonable people can disagree about how big that head start is, right? Like we can debate how much are we actually tipping the scale? How big of an impact is, for example, being 5.22 times more likely to get an F? How big does that impact have on your academic achievement? But I think it's impossible to look at this report and argue that that head start does not exist. So what that means is, assuming the Supreme Court decision goes the way it looks like it will, by the time they apply to college, if our Black and Latino and Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander students can't manage to catch up to their peers who got a head start, well, too bad, because colleges can't take that head start into consideration when they're evaluating applications. So to me, what this means is that what was already an urgent problem is about to become even more urgent. So I really want to thank Dr. Austin and staff for digging in here instead of shying away from this data. Like Mr. Brienza said, once we say it, we can work on it. And I also want to encourage you to keep going. I would really like to see this data point on the equity scorecard that's being developed by the Board Equity Oversight Committee. And Mr. Moore, I would also love to see on that scorecard a comparison of A's and B's, because I suspect that if we flip from looking at D's and F's to looking at A's and B's, we're going to see those percentages flip too and reveal yet another barrier. So, okay, that's it. I'm done. Thank you.
Mr. Durant.
You know, the no mark and F piece is the clearest picture we've gotten so far of the existence of, you know, systemic bias. We talk about it, we've talked about it, we convened a committee, we developed a plan, but this is the first time we can take a piece of paper and say, look, this is the explanation. And that's really powerful because we did set in motion all these initiatives through the BEOC, through the SWIFT plan, for example, standards aligned grading, grading for equity. Now what was sort of a broader set of initiatives can be targeted and focused on precisely the problem that we've identified. When we were on that committee, Ms. Latimer and I, we and you remember, Ms. Conaway, that we talked about this idea that the board should be able to be the one setting the goals, but the committee and staff should be able to be agile with how they're achieving those goals. And this is precisely why, because now we have another piece of the puzzle. And so in alignment with those goals, staff can go back and reassess how to target the initiatives that we already have, and make sure that we are now targeting exactly what we've seen is a problem. And like Ms. Latimer said, I also suspect that this is an indication of a greater issue that we've talked about, but if we break down the data in a number of different ways, we're going to see that many different ways reflecting what we see today.
Other comments? I have a couple of comments. Thank you for the report. I think that for one thing, I think looking systematically at grades is something that we began with the DNF report a few years ago, but it's sort of obviously a rich area to find, significant processes that are affecting our kids, and it's about the easiest data that we have, right? I mean, we have an entire organization that is basically based around producing this data and making sure that it's right and associating it with, it's just so the fact that we haven't exploited it for insight, in the past, I think is a real missed opportunity. And so it's terrific, as Ms. Woodham was saying, to see that we're doing it. I think to add to the points that others have made, I think that this grades are really fundamental, not just to understanding how students are treated, but also to understanding their experience at school. Being in an organization that gives you a break, that extends you a helping hand, that lets you have a second chance, that's a fundamentally different experience than one that doesn't let you do that, and that gives you a failing grade with no recourse when you don't perform. And I think that grades are tremendously important to students, and their experience of their lives at school is also tremendously important in terms of how they're treated when they're being graded. So I think it's a huge point of opportunity for us to make a big change in how students experience school. Exactly the students that we're trying to attach further to school. There's nothing I don't think more alienating of a student and more likely to cause them to detach from school than to be treated as if they don't have a growth opportunity and as if they aren't as important as their other schoolmates. So thank you for the work. I think it's going to bear fruit.
Keep tuning in.
I'm going to keep tuning. It gives me another reason. It's like a cliffhanger. So I'll follow this work eagerly. Thank you. Any other comments or questions on this item? Then let's move on to our information items. These are items that are, for which there's no staff report, and we don't discuss them unless there is interest either from a member of the community to make a comment or board members to comment. We do have one member of the public who would like to comment on 8D, the progress report on ad hoc committees. That's Gabrielle Grief. So Ms. Grief, if you're there, you can make your comment.
Hello, thank you for letting me speak. This comment is addressed to the Ad Hoc Advisory Committee on Childcare. This committee's work is in progress, and I hope that my words tonight will reach them. Our family has enjoyed Kids' Choice at Nixon Elementary going on 5 years now. They are an extremely valuable and indispensable part of our lives. Kids' Choice is a woman and person of color owned and operated local business. They offer consistent, trusted, high quality, licensed childcare. Here are a few things being a licensed provider entails: staying open until 6 p.m., having at least one staff on premises trained in CPR and pediatric first aid, employing qualified teachers, having a disaster plan, implementing minimum indoor and outdoor space requirements, and having annual licensing visits. Right at School is an out-of-state, venture capital funded, for-profit business. Right at School is technically an enrichment program, like a parent-run dance class or soccer shots, not a licensed childcare provider in the state of California. As such, they are required to do none of the above, and often they don't. I am not alone in saying that I have serious concerns about Right at School, about its introduction and insinuation into our school district, and about the quality of childcare it offers now and will offer in the future. Kids' Choice is a truly excellent choice. They must continue to operate and be available to all Nixon Elementary families in their current location for years to come. The actions of this school board and the Ad Hoc Committee on Childcare will set a precedent for the future of childcare in the district. Concerned parents are carefully watching for their recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more commenter, Sarah Woodham on Zoom. Ms. Woodham.
Hi. So I wanted to comment on the CASP student performance data. And sorry, I don't have it in front of me right now, but as I recall, when I looked at it, I'm always interested to see how demographic breakdowns look. And, and when I looked at it before, the ethnic background, we had ELA and math scores and just, whether or not, exceeded, etc. Just as like a total number. So it's all the students from like 3 through 8 and 11th grade. And just what the performance was on, by that, by the entire aggregate. And I find it particularly not useful when things are not broken down by at least school levels, elementary, middle, high. So I'm not sure when I see like that, let's say, what is it, met or exceeded for the Black or Latino population at 50% for grades 3 through 8 and 11. I don't know how to interpret that, and I would just encourage the board, and I appreciate the data, to like peel a layer at that onion, and peel another layer there, and let's break that down so that we can better understand, like, how to triage at what level of education, or just how to interpret the data, because as it stands, I truly have no sense of what that means, except that it's not good. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Comments or questions on any of these items from board members? Mr. Collins.
I also want to comment on the CASP results. I do think it would be useful at some point to do a deeper dive on the CASP results. I'm not sure exactly what that should look like, but it is, in a sense, our district report card on academic aspects of the district for the year. And there is a lot of, yeah, sure.
I think I can help everybody.
You can shut me up in a hurry.
Yes, that's my goal.
Yeah.
No, just joking. This item is coming back. I want to say it's January or February, is the dashboard.
Yeah. When the
which is
dashboard
the
comes out.
complete report. So this report was a mirror of the snapshot last year for the same purpose. So I think what people are expecting is to see the equivalent to the dashboard. That is already on our calendar off the top of my head, I think it's February.
I think the dashboard generally comes out in January, or that's the plan. Thank you for shutting me up. The one thing I did want to share, though, is I'm a real CAST data nerd, and I spend a lot of time, I download the entire state's CAST data and do a bunch of analysis comparing districts. And one thing that I wanted to share is that one group that I think is very interesting, tells us a lot about district performance, is low-income Latino students, who are 43% of all of California students. And so not only does that make them important because there are a lot of them, but they also means that most districts report results every year by grade level for those students. And I think it tells us a lot about school performance, because those are students generally who are not getting as much support outside the home as more affluent students. So one thing I look at is the amount of change among student performance, district performance for that group of students. If you look at ELA third grade, which is obviously an area that we've focused on, the state overall for third grade low-income Latino students had a -8 percentage points, a drop of -8 of students meeting and exceeding. It went from about 37 to about 29% of low-income Latino students, which is heartbreaking and disturbing, and obviously creates a big question about what we're going to do about it. One bright spot in that report, though, looking at the 300 or so largest districts in the state, is that for Palo Alto, that number went up by 9%, and by 9 percentage points, which was the largest increase of any district, of the districts, the 300 districts that I track in the state, which took us from last year in the bottom 5% of all districts in California to this year in the top 25% of districts in California. Now, it's still appallingly low. I mean, there's no victory lap here, right? There's no victory. It's relative improvement in a year that everybody else went this way, we went this way. But I think that represented, in my mind, a lot of work by our staff, by our teachers, by everyone, an all-in organizational effort, as Dr. Austin said many times, to try to create that result. So the fact that we saw that result in a year that everybody else struggled, that we succeeded, in fact, appeared to succeed in this particular year more than anybody else, I think is, something to be noted and applauded. And I really thank the staff for that result.
Thank you. Other comments or questions from board members?
Yeah,
Ms.
but not-
Loudermilk?
Not on CASP, is that okay?
Yeah.
Can I do something else? Okay. I just wanted to briefly say something about item C, the serve and celebrate others. I just want to echo Principal Downing's shout out to Lena, who's Addison's day custodian. I've had 4 kids go through Addison, 2 of them are still there, and all of them count Lena as one of their trusted adults. She makes school feel like home to them. And she's one of those people whose job descriptions can't come anywhere close to capturing what she does and what she gives every day. I would say, Dr. Austin, that we need as many people like her as we can find, and we do, but there aren't very many of them. So I'm really grateful to Principal Downing for lifting her up, and I wanted to do the same.
Yeah, that's nice. Sounds terrific. She sounds terrific. Any other comments or questions from board members? Okay, then let's move on to item 9, board operations. Mr. Brinza?
I'm not sure if I should have done it there in serve others, celebrate and serve others, but my every meeting focus on a builder, and I've got 2 tonight because both of our high school theater teachers, Kristen Lowe at Gunn and Sarah Thurmond at Pally, have pulled off amazing shows with some steep uphill climbs. I think for a little Gunn's show translations had to be shut down for the first weekend because of a wave of COVID, but they managed to go on, second weekend, and was a really successful show. And Sarah Thurmond and her whole team put on Radium Girls for the past 2 weekends at Pally, which just, I feel like everyone in town is talking about how great it was, how moving it was. And so shout out to both of them and everyone who works with them to make these 2 performances just outstanding.
Great. Any other board operations? Okay, this meeting is adjourned.